not yet had the pleasure of joining us in our new electronic meeting format. Before we go on to the agenda items this evening, I want to acknowledge that this is a remote meeting format. On March 6th, I issued an emergency proclamation declaring a civil emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 outbreak. On March 24th, the Governor issued Proclamation 20-28 prohibiting meetings that fall under the Open Public Meetings Act, such as our City Council meetings, from being conducted in person. The prohibition has been extended through July 1st. Tonight's meeting will be held entirely remotely. The meeting will be recorded, streamed live, and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone, to listen live or to the meeting, or to make comments. Many of you signed up in advance to make comments, and if anyone is on the call who did not sign up but would like to speak, please press *3 on your phone and ask to be added to the speakers list. At this point in time, we're going to take a moment to do the roll call of our council members in attendance. So please stay here when I call your name. Councilmember DeMichelle. Here. Councilmember Goodman.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Council President Hunt.
Here.
Councilmember Martz.
Here.
Deputy Council President Ray. I believe he's still trying to log on. Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
So we have 6 of our 7 City Council members with us now, and Deputy Council President Ray is still trying to connect to the meeting. We also have various staff members are participating in our meeting tonight, including City Administrator Bob Kowitz, Assistant to the City Administrator Autumn Monahan, Economic Development Manager Jen Davis-Hayes, Parks Director Jeff Watling, Human Services Coordinator Monica Negrilla, City Attorney Jim Haney, Executive Assistant Joanne Biscara, and our Deputy City Clerk, Tisha Geezer. Other city staff may also be in attendance tonight. For those members of the public on the call, welcome. The clerk or I will call on you to make comments when we reach that portion of the agenda. And I do have some meeting guidelines that I'd like to go over. So for all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before you are speaking. Mute your microphone when you are not speaking. If you are also streaming live the video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. And for council members, please continue to use the chat function to indicate when you would wish to speak. Please identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, or second a motion, or participate in a debate. The next item on the agenda this evening is public comments. So for those providing comments, please direct them to the whole council and not to individuals. While this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When you are recognized, please unmute your microphone, and *6 may be an option on your phone. State your name and address and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. When you're done, please remute your microphone. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You're encouraged to rejoin the meeting if able. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior are not permitted, and if a speaker is out of order, I will have to ask them to stop and/or mute their microphone. If a speaker does not comply, I may direct the staff to mute the microphone. If a disruption to the meeting occurs and order cannot be restored, I may direct staff to remove you from the call. Citizen comments, whether they're written or verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the City Council and myself take them very seriously. We thank you for joining us this evening and taking the time to address us. City Clerk, can you please identify the first person who signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, the first person is Cynthia Drushba.
Cynthia, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. I unmuted myself. Maybe an hour, 90 minutes ago, I sent some information I'd like to be shared with the entire council, and I'd like to thank you for letting me speak tonight. I actually live in the city of Carnation, but I have been beginning to get involved in affordable housing, and it's not really affordable. as compared to subsidized housing. And I was looking really forward last October to the senior veteran levy starting a shallow rent program. And it would have did veteran seniors, but more than that, it was $1.1 million in the county. People, which anybody who's rent burdened in King County or Issaquah is eligible for. And then COVID hit, but I was encouraging them to start it online. And then one day I was listening to a pre-recorded council meeting and from King County, and Dow just gave away the $1.5 million. He just sent it over to United Way. And I had to go to my mother's apartment and tell them there's no shallow rent program going to come for you guys. He gave it away at least until 2020. It broke my heart. I don't know why he did that. I don't know how he could do that legally. It was a levy. I'm sure like somebody to look into it. But as I look at the properties in your area, because my mother lives in an Imagine property, a senior apartment in Kirkland, I noticed you have 3 in the city of Issaquah, which is Andrews Arms, Johnson Hill, and Rose Creek. I think it would be nice if you could, and looking at my statistics, I didn't go all the way down to 30%. I went to about 40%. There's 26 extremely rent-burdened families there. So 1 month help with rent's not going to help. And I'm just going to encourage you, not just for those properties, but say 26 families, then multiply it or go up to 50. Please take some of that money and start a shallow rent program in your city. I'd really encourage you to. And I've sent some information, so please read it. If you're confused at all, I'd love to go over it with you. But this one-time shot countywide with money that was supposed to help people on a consistent basis forever, let them live and be housed, is gone. And I just don't know what we're going to do. But you have $1.1 million, and if you could maybe try to look at funding 45 or 50 households in a shallow rent program, maybe even down to 40%, not 30%, I think that would be the difference between families becoming homeless or not. So if you'd like to talk to me in the future, I'd like to share my more ideas and thoughts on it if you have any misunderstandings. So please, this was a problem that was countywide before COVID, and giving away that money just made it a lot worse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. City Clerk, who's next on our list this evening?
Next, we have Lindsay Lambert.
Welcome, Lindsay. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Lindsay Lambert. I just had to unmute myself. I'm sorry. I'm the owner of One Mind Yoga. I have a small business on Front Street, and I am here just advocating for the emergence in not only on Front Street, but in the city of Issaquah, small businesses like myself, especially those with a lot of restrictions on them, studios, fitness studios in particular, and gyms that we are continuing patiently waiting and slowly beginning to restart. We had 3 months, like everyone else, where we had to continue to pay rent and not able to see our clientele. And so I'm just really advocating for small business grants to go to the businesses of Issaquah. And that's really what I have to say. So I'm going to keep it short. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for coming tonight, Lindsay. City Clerk, who's next on our list this evening?
Next, we have Kathy McQuarrie.
Kathy, you're up. Have you confirmed that Kathy is on the?
Yes, I'm showing that.
Great.
Kathy?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, City Council. My name is Kathy McQuarrie. I'm the CEO of the Greater Issaquah Chamber, located at 155 Gilman Boulevard. The Chamber of Commerce, our 400-plus business members, and their employees would like to take this opportunity to thank you for all you are doing to support the economic survival of our community by considering AB 7992 and AB 7993 this evening. Local businesses are the heart of the community, as businesses contribute significantly to the tax revenue received by the city, the donations made to social services, schools, and nonprofits that they make, plus the sponsorship dollars they provide to events, as well as the volunteerism to help the community in its efforts to improve. During these challenging times, it is vital that we look at programs that will support businesses and jumpstart our economy, in turn, bringing lost revenues back into city coffers and donations back into the rest of the community. In response to AB 7992, the Chamber supports this agenda bill and would allocate the following amounts of the $1.127,700 million the city has received from the CARES Act: $500,000 for direct business grants, $427,700 for reimbursement to the portion of city expenses incurred to address the COVID-19 crisis, $200,000 on top of the additional $100,000 in rental assistance already allocated to human service agencies serving Issaquah residents, and $500,000 provided to the city from King County CARES Act to direct the business grants program. Please know that the Chamber Foundation Board of Directors has volunteered to help implement or assist in the business grant program in any way that we can. In response to AB 7993, the Chamber supports the temporary regulatory relief for businesses, the use of sidewalks, and when possible, parking spaces and right-of-ways or streets to expand outdoor service for restaurants, retail, and fitness customers, with the assurance that businesses are required to follow up-to-date social distancing guidelines as indicated by the phases we are in at the time. We also support the request to suspend the temporary sign permit process for movable A-frames and waive the permit fee, thus reducing the approval process by up to a week. We would also like to inform City Council we'd like to inform City Council on a side note that we are now in receipt of 12,018 cloth masks, 20,191 disposable masks, and 346 hand sanitizers that we will be distributing free of charge to the businesses in Issaquah as part of a King County initiative. Distribution will begin later this week. Again, we'd like to thank City Council, the Mayor, City Administrator, and the Economic Development Committee for all of your hard work. Your partnership is extremely important to us and the entire business community of Issaquah, whom we represent. We truly appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. City Clerk, who is up next this evening?
Next, we have Taylor Miller.
Great. Taylor, if you want to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Hi. So my name is Taylor Miller. I'm the dealer and partner of Evergreen Chevrolet in Issaquah. I've worked in Issaquah my whole life, and I have a deep care factor on how the federal fund of the $1.1 million is designated within our city. Businesses such as myself have been going through an even harder time than what we've been through in 2008 when the recession hit. The impact of shutting down our businesses while still having expenses to pay, such as rent, employee expense, and a complete loss of sales is detrimental to our business owners. These small businesses are the core of Issaquah. It's what keeps the city receiving healthy B&O taxes. It's what keeps people employed in our city, and it's what keeps people living in our city. It's why I believe it's imperative to use all of the $1.1 million to support our local businesses. It in turn supports the city with the B&O tax revenues and will lead to a stronger city. Please, if I have one asked, to not let the small businesses go without having their backs and helping them to survive through this time. These businesses are people's dreams that they've worked their whole lives for, It's their livelihoods. It's how they put food on the table for themselves and their families. You know, if we could just rally around the businesses to help succeed and help get us through this crisis. Although we're opening doors slowly, businesses will not be able to restore profitability to create jobs and taxes which fund our city. So now more than ever, I think we really need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. City Clerk, who's up next?
Nathan Bosseldor.
Nathan, please unmute yourself and welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. Everyone hear me? This is Nathan Bosler with Castus Corporation. I'm also representing the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce this evening, as I sit on the board for the Chamber and many different committees as well. I'm here to speak on behalf of businesses. Just like Taylor and some of the others and Kathy, we want to make sure that this new $1.1 million CARE Act can be allocated a significant portion, if not all, to the businesses. I know you guys all know about how much our businesses not only care and love our community, but as I want to echo Taylor, these are our dreams to be in business, to create a revenue, to contribute both on a personal level and at a business level, and to make it possible for our employees and our culture of our companies to be able to contribute and give back as well. We want our people of all of our organizations to be able to support our local not-for-profits and to be able to create awesome revenues so that we can all thrive together, creating great taxes for B&O taxes for the city and allowing us to continue to grow. This time has been very, very difficult for a lot of business owners. You know, I work so closely with everyone here in Issaquah on just a larger level reaching into Bellevue and all over the place, and businesses are struggling. The people that are the community leaders, it's the first time in my life that I'm hearing them say, we're going to the drawing board pretty hard right now because we're trying to figure out the next year, TBD to come, what we're going to do. This CARES Act could help stimulate business. It could help spark business and thrive our community back to what it was before. The CARES Act before really helped business. It gave us a definite like restart, kickstart of emphasis of we can do it. We're here together as a community to grow. And I know the City Council works tirelessly to help business, to help hear our voice, to listen to, and we love that and support it and appreciate that so much. So again, I'm here to speak on behalf of the businesses and the Chamber and the people as a resident here in Issaquah, that our city matters to us. We love our city. We love our people. And think of this CARES Act. Truly think of it as your possible investment. You've heard everyone saying this is the time to invest. This is the time to invest. If you have money, now's the time to invest. It's that at this level as well. Now's the time to invest into our businesses and our people so that our businesses can give you back that growth that we all have the ability to do together now. So think of this as an investment. This is an investment in your businesses so that we can continue to thrive. Thank you very much and for the time and listening to me. And feel free to always reach out to me if you have questions or you need our support in any level. Again, this is Nathan Bosler with Castus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathan. City Clerk, who else is on our list this evening?
Real quick, I'd like to remind any callers who didn't sign up in advance that if you'd like to make comments tonight, you can press *3 on your phone and we'll see your raised hand and add you to the speakers list. That's *3. And the next commenter is John Houlihan.
Thank you. John, if you want to unmute, you're up next.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My family owns the commercial property. You probably know it as the Domino's property on Front Street. It's at 108 Front Street at the northeast corner of Front and Alder Street. And I'd just like to chat with you this evening about the cities and downtown Issaquah Association's plan for a streetery to close Front Street on a pilot project and perhaps longer to allow a more intensive use of sidewalks and actually closing Front Street and Alder Street. We were just informed of the potential closure of Front Street and Alder Street just Thursday or Wednesday last week, and it's been a bit of a shock and quite difficult to get some information about the specifics about what's going on because the closure of Alder Street, as you might imagine, would have a pretty significant impact on our tenant Domino's Pizza. You know, just the number of people that drive in there to pick up pizzas and they need to deliver pizzas. And we're just a bit concerned that the complete closure of Alder Street for 2 weeks and perhaps longer into the summer would place some really specific adverse impacts on this one business. We have been working with DIA and with Jen Hayes in Economic Development to see if we can mitigate some of those impacts, and they have been responsive and helpful. But we are concerned that the current plan for the complete closure of Alder Street would have those specific adverse effects on traffic and businesses alike, and in particular, Domino's. In conjunction with the streetery plan, you'll be considering the ordinance this evening to allow a much more streamlined and easier process to get permits for sidewalk cafes, parking lot use, and other street right-of-way uses. And we're just concerned that the streetery plan and the new ordinance may create the potential for conflict or overlap in permits that could further impact businesses. We completely support the idea of giving businesses the opportunity to expand their footprint in these difficult times as we move out from the COVID-19 restrictions. But we just want to be careful because of the particular impacts it may have on the Domino's business at that particular location. The thing I would appreciate, and I've asked Jen Hayes and the DIA to consider this, but if the City Council would also put it in their radar screen, and that would be one of the simple solutions that would help alleviate some of these impacts is when the streetery is not operating during the week, is to keep Alder Street, at least the east section of Alder Street, open to traffic so that there can be easy ingress and egress for delivery folks, customers, and supply vehicles. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I look forward to downtown Issaquah. Once again, their businesses being vibrant and a wonderful place for people to come and spend their time. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, John. City Clerk, who's up next?
Next, we have Kristy Triple.
Thank you. Kristy, if you want to unmute, you are on.
Oh, am I back off mute?
You are off mute and ready to go.
Me. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristy Triple. My address is 1595 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite 1 here in Issaquah. I'm speaking on behalf of Raleigh Properties, as well as being an Issaquah resident, to Agenda Bill 7992 and 93. Here's the thing. I love this community and all the moving parts that make it work. We are in this together and we need balance. I know you've already heard from us, but I wanted to share again as it's so important. I'll be as brief as I can, but I know many are likely waiting in the queue, though I can't see them in this new meeting form. I have no idea how many. I wanted to share we support both agenda bills as proposed and ask that you take action to approve this evening. Agenda Bill 7993 is easy. Let's be creative and give business the best ability to serve under the Start Safe guidelines. And 7992, it's balanced in its approach for use of the CARES Act funding. COVID-19 hit us like a freight train out of nowhere, and it has changed life for all of us right now. It's been 3 months and 20 days since the onset of the pandemic here. For King County, just stepping into phase 2, we likely have another 6 weeks plus to get back to phase 4 if we don't end up going backwards. Most businesses and many citizens, I suspect, have less than 2 months reserve, if that. To reinvest $550,000 of the CARES funding back into businesses during this hard time through a small grant program helps ensure recipients continue doing what they do best and reinvesting back into Issaquah with jobs, taxes, and services and goods our residents expect. And alike, investing $200,000 in human services helps those in need keep a roof over one's head and food on their plate when a job has been paused or lost by a business's inability to operate under the current guidelines or impact. We all need us to get back to business and on to the new. I just ask you to take a moment and pause
and think about all of the local businesses and your friends that you visit on a routine basis that support you and your family. Where do you shop? Where do you heal? Where do you eat? What if they were no longer here and no one in their place? This is a time to support them so that they can continue giving back to our community. Lastly, I want to thank Council, Administration, the Issaquah Recovery Task Force, and our Community Vision partners who are all working so very hard to support our local businesses and our citizens through this time. Your quick implementation of their recommendations and each positive acknowledgement makes a difference by creating hope. Hope that is necessary right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristy. City Clerk, who's next on our list?
Next, we have Michael Brown.
Michael, if you want to come off mute, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
We can, thanks.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Michael Brown. I'm the owner of For Our Families, Inc., doing business as Domino's on Alder and Front Street. And I just wanted to voice some of my concerns tonight about the closure of Front Street coming up. So I wanted to say thank you for the council's concern of the businesses and the COVID issues. And I agree with everything that's the intent of helping. And I appreciate everything that everybody's doing on the council. My concern is that when our business is doing, for example, a salmon days, we take a 50% loss on those 2 days in sales because we can't get our delivery drivers in and out of the location, nor can our customers make access to our facility. So I applaud what the ordinance that's online about giving sidewalks and private property use and the parking lots. But reading it, I didn't realize that public right-of-ways would mean the whole closure of Front Street. And I'm not sure if that's what the intent was of the city council. I also find that it's kind of odd that today when I came in to meet to discuss this into the city, that there was already signage digital boards that were saying that Front Street was going to be closed. So when I asked how the permits got approved for something that the city council had not voted on yet to approve, how did that get passed through already when the vote was tonight? For my business personally, again, closing Alder and Front Street closes both legal roadways of access into my business. I sent my first notice, as John Houlihan said earlier, was Wednesday. We had a visit and was informed of this. Thursday, we sat in and on a call, which it sounded like on the association, the decision was already made when we voiced our concern. I've had phone calls on Friday and emails to the city representatives with promises to get back with me on my concerns, which none of them have been answered to the day of this call right now. I also think that the city needs to consider what is going to impact the businesses in the area. It's not just about being concerned about Front Street businesses, but what about the businesses that are impacted in the surrounding area and communities by this throughfare that is very important to a lot of people to use. I believe 20,000 vehicles a day go through there, which is going to stop 20,000 vehicles from seeing my store. And I believe there was also, I would like to point out to the city council that there's an impact study that was done on February of 2018 that would give more details of what kind of impact this does to the area. I believe it was done in with King County. So with this said, I don't know if the overall good, I've asked also, I understand the goal of trying to drive our businesses forward, but to date, I've also asked, how is the success of this project going to be measured? And not one person can tell me.
Hi, Michael, are you still there? We've lost you. So, City Clerk, we may have lost the last part of Michael's comments. I'm not sure if he's able to sign back on. Does he still have additional time to provide comment?
He had about 1 minute remaining.
Okay, if we see him come back in, let's allow him to finish. Do you have anyone else on your list?
Yes, Noel Wright.
Thanks. Noel, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate the council listening to the many voices that have come before it. And a professor in college once told me that the difficult choices in life are not between good and bad. Usually they're between two goods or two bads. And you guys have been faced with lots of challenging choices here lately, and I applaud your effort to be informed and make decisions in these areas. As you guys look at the CARES Act and the distribution of funds from the CARES Act.
Oh, hi, Michael. I hear that you're back on the call. We started with another commentator. If you hang on mute, we'll come back to you after. You have another minute to finish your comment.
Thank you.
Noel, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I think the current balancing of the distribution of the CARES Act is reflective of our community values. And I know I wrote an email that you guys read. I received responses, and I don't want to go through that again. But the impact of the grants is profound on small businesses. I'm an attorney in town, and our firm has been here for 13 years. And the clients that talk about losing their businesses and not being able to pay their employees is heartbreaking, and that grants can be given and help those businesses stay in business so that they can pay their employees, so that they can pay their rent. I think the multiplying impact of each dollar invested in those grants is a significant factor that will contribute to tax income for Issaquah and be a benefit above a dollar increase. And then the balancing of the city taking some of those funds. I admire the city's efforts in cutting its budgets and limiting the impact as far as it can. I think, to me, it seems appropriate to take some of those funds and take care of the city as we rely on it for the services that are so important and valued in our community. And taking money away from that, from the city, is going to have to be made somewhere. And people may lose jobs, the city employees, if the city doesn't have enough funds to care for its services. So balancing in that area. And then, as people have discussed, the balancing of the services and rent relief, where $300,000 have been geared toward that. I think that balance reflects our community, and I would encourage the council to adopt that balance. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Wright. Michael, we'll come back to you. You have about a minute to close out your comments.
Yeah, sorry about that disconnect.
No worries.
The only reason I bring up about the traffic impact is just what's the goodwill that it's going to do in the area by people being frustrated with the traffic burden that comes on towards the city of Enumclaw. I'll forward emails that I've sent out with some ideas to help to the city council members and the mayor. And then the CARES Act, I agree with a lot of people that the $1.1 million could be spent in great ways to help businesses directly. And thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate for listening to me.
Thank you, Michael. Just a reminder, if there are people at tonight's meeting that have not signed up to speak and would like an opportunity to do that, please press *3 and we'll call the first six digits of your phone number to let you know when it's your turn to make comments. And City Clerk, do we have anyone else signed up tonight to speak?
Yes, the last person who signed up in advance is Daniel Rowe.
Thank you. Dan, if you want to unmute yourself, you have the floor.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can, thanks.
Great. Hello, everybody. Well, obviously, we've talked a lot about the federal funds and approximately $1.1 million to be used for the economic development. I strongly ask you to support your small business in Issaquah with this money. These businesses are the backbone of the city who have given all their hard-earned money to create a living for themselves and families. These people also create jobs for families in our town. These business owners have given everything and more just to survive 2020. Please think of them, the Subway franchise owner, the Domino's pizza store, the small pizza stores, the small mom and pop shops, and the small shops up in the Highlands. All of our restaurant owners are struggling to survive. Now, please take a moment and think of them and their families and help put money towards them. Yes, Costco, Fred Meyer's, Home Depot are flourishing in this environment. But the real core of our community is the small business owners who pay more than their share of the B&O taxes. I respectfully ask that you support these families, and without these businesses, there will be no Front Street, no Gilman Village. Imagine salmon days with boarded up windows from local businesses who could not survive. These are small businesses in Issaquah and restaurant businesses that need help. Now's your time to support them and do what's right for everyone. I look forward to seeing you make the right decisions and putting a lot of that money towards the small businesses in our community. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking tonight, Dan. I'm going to check back in with the City Clerk and see if anyone else has signed up to speak this evening.
No, and no one has raised their hand, so we've concluded public comment.
That is great. This evening we did hear from several representatives from the Chamber and local businesses and property owners about how the CARES Act funding should be allocated in our town. We did hear a concern also over the closure of Front Street and Alder Street. And there was a speaker as well who wanted to express her concerns over the loss of funding that was meant to go towards affordable housing for low-income renters who really needed the assistance. So I thank everyone for coming tonight. I agree. I recognize that this is a bit of an awkward format, a little different than what we're used to, but I appreciate that you took the time out of your night to come and share this with the City Council and myself. You can also submit comments online at citycouncil@issaquah.gov. And in addition to comments received by email on tonight's agenda topics, I will ask Council President Hunt under the relevant agenda item to let us know if there has been other information that has been shared. And we are doing that currently as we're in this COVID form of holding our meeting. So thank you, Councilmember Hunt, for keeping track of that. The next item on the agenda this evening is ID 0722. It's a recovery task force update. And I'd like to invite City Administrator Wally Bobkowitz to present on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. Deputy Clerk, if you could bring up the slide presentation. Thank you. We have 3 items for you this evening, all of them related to the COVID-19 crisis. We have been before you on several occasions over the last several months as the city and the region and really the world has looked to address this horrible pandemic that has caused widespread concern not only for the health of our communities, our physical health, but also the economic health. And Mayor Pauly wanted the staff this evening to do a couple of things. First, we're going to give you an update on the work of the Issaquah Recovery Task Force, the areas that they have been focusing on. We have several staff members with us this evening to give you updates on the various areas of focus of the Recovery Task Force. Second is an ordinance that will make some changes to help support our businesses. Some of this has already been referenced during the public comment, but we believe that some changes are necessary again to continue to support our local businesses as they get up and running. And then finally, we have on the agenda a proposal for the allocation of the CARES Act money, the money that the United States Congress made available to states, counties, and cities over 500,000 for supporting activities in communities impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. We unfortunately, as an individual city, have not received any funding, but both the state of Washington and King County have received funding. And so we are before you this evening to talk about the allocation of that. So those are the three topics regarding the COVID-19 crisis we have. So let me get into the Recovery Task Force. Next slide. As you know, Mayor Pauly, in sort of assessing, once we got through the budget changes that we needed to make, Mayor Pauly decided it would make sense for us to convene a community task force to look at the recovery of Issaquah from the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. The task force was created in May of 2020. There are currently 11 members and 3 alternates. The members were solicited from members of our existing boards and commissions. There were also alternates selected, and the mayor also identified a few individuals for their unique understanding of some of the issues that we're facing as a community. So at this point, we have 11 members and 3 alternates. This task force has met every 2 weeks since then, the second and fourth Thursday of each month. And after receiving a general overview of some of the issues that the city are facing, the task force created a work plan that the administration has been using to focus our efforts. Next slide. Next slide, please. So there are 6 areas of priority areas of focus, and we have staff here this evening that will speak to each of them. First is economic recovery. We have been before the council on a few occasions talking about our economic recovery plan. Jen Davis-Hayes is here with us this evening and will provide an overview of that plan and an update on some of the work that we're doing on the plan. The second area is communications, and Autumn Monahan, the assistant to the city administrator, is here to give an overview of what we have been doing over the last few months to communicate to the public about the crisis and our recovery efforts. Next, I'll give an update on community health. The task force is just now moving in to that area, and I'll give an update on that. Human services, Jeff Watling and Monica Barella are here, and they will provide an update on where we are on human service issues. Post-recovery planning, I'll give an update on that, probably the area that we have the most work to be doing on. And then finally, community engagement, how we're restarting some of our municipal services and other ways of reaching out to the community. And again, Jeff Watling will start with that. Next slide. So on economic recovery, let me turn this over to Jen Davis-Hayes, our Economic Development Manager, for her portion of the presentation. Jen?
Thank you, City Administrator Bobkowitz. Good evening, City Council. I am excited to talk to you about the updates to our economic recovery plan. Next slide, please, Tisha. The task force was really instrumental in helping us refine the economic recovery plan for the city. We did as a vision partner group. That group includes the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Issaquah Association, Issaquah Highlands Council, Gilman Village Merchants Association, and Visit Issaquah, presented to the Recovery Task Force about some of the ideas, and the Recovery Task Force then summarized these are the economic recovery components that we are now implementing. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll give you an update about many of these today. Our business recovery plan, we were in front of council at the study session on June 9th, and it has 4 components. So we're looking at business assistance and services, the regulatory relief, which again tonight we have 2 items on that, our promotion and messaging, and we'll talk about our Issaquah Loyal Shop Local program, and measurement and reporting. Next slide. So for our direct economic assistance, 2 of the things that we'll be looking at are the business grant program, and we'll provide more details during the CARES Act funding discussion, where we'll get into more of the details about the program that we are proposing. And we're also looking to talk more about the lodging tax revenues and funding source. On July 7th, we have scheduled a LTAC, so that's a Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meeting, where we'll talk about direct support to Village Theater and how we handle future lodging tax distributions. We know that at the state level, there are some discussions about potential changes or flexibility to allow cities to utilize these resources in different ways, and so we're keeping our eye on that. Next slide. So the regulatory relief. So you've heard a lot of comments this evening about support for the two proposals on today's council agenda. The one is for a quick approval for sidewalk and private property, outdoor dining, and other business use. So currently the review process could take several weeks and requires businesses not only to provide information about what they're going to do, but also make sure they have accessibility and other health and safety requirements. We will continue to ask for that information, but we have narrowed down the application process and have worked with our staff in development services to allow for a quick turnaround, potentially a day or two, that would allow restaurant owners or retail owners or other service businesses to utilize sidewalks and private property, such as parking lots, in a more robust fashion to enhance their business operations area. Again, we know that a lot of capacity issues around reopening are limitations for our businesses to do business, and so we hope that helps them to be able to increase their revenues. We are proposing, as part of this ordinance, to waive the fee, which is about $300 for this. And then the other ordinance we're looking at is to ease the temporary sign requirements. So again, looking at the A-frames that are utilized for many businesses to communicate to their customers, we recognize how important that is for them to be able to communicate how to do curbside pickup, talking about their business operations, or just letting them know that they are open or their hours have changed. We are proposing in the ordinance to waive the requirements for this permit process and waive the fee, which is approximately $100. And for both of these permits, the city still reserves the right to go back and work with the business owner if there are concerns about accessibility or safety or other issues. Next slide, please. The opening of Front Street. And so you also heard tonight a little bit more about that. So we are looking to expand outdoor options for businesses. And I have said probably way too many times for the people working with me, this is not an event. This is intended to allow businesses to have additional space in the outside to do their business. We're looking at Fridays and Saturdays. Fridays starting at 2 p.m., the street will be closed through Saturday night at 10:30 p.m. We're looking to start it this next Friday, the 26th of June, and we plan to evaluate this after 2 weeks by doing a business survey the businesses about their changes in sales, their changes in employee hours, their customers, around foot traffic, looking at what suggestions, what worked and what didn't. We'll work also with Downtown Issaquah Association and other city staff and in the general public to get any feedback along that. I will say there is a little bit of confusion, and I apologize for that the ordinance that is on the agenda tonight is not about the closing of Front Street. The closure of Front Street is about applied for and processed through a special events permit, which is a regular activity of our staff and administration. They typically are not presented to council, and they are not asked for approval or denial. So the ordinance that we are asking for approval tonight has to do with the ongoing opportunity for businesses, not only in downtown, but throughout the city, to utilize sidewalks and private parking areas to do their business. And I would like to, again, obviously heard some comments this evening from the owners at Domino's at Front and Alder, and let you know that not only have I spoken to them, but also Stephen Padua, who has been instrumental in working all the details for this in our Public Works Engineering Department, as well as Christina Brenning, who is actually on the phone here to answer questions later from the Downtown Issaquah Association. And we have worked with them to offer some alternatives, such as I know that Dia has worked with a adjacent property owner to set aside some spots for Domino's drivers so they can have easy access on the other side of Front Street. We've also looked at if there is, during the week, if Alder remains closed throughout the week, if there are dedicated spots on Front Street. Again, none of this has been approved, but we're working at trying to find some creative solutions to make it work for all businesses. We know that this will be an impact to traffic, and we've looked at our traffic counts and understand that they're about 31% lower than pre-pandemic. I know it's changing every day, but we believe that with past road work, et cetera, that people get used to using the new detours, the new routes. And so we believe that people will begin to use Newport and or I-90 and go around Sunset. One of the things to remember that the impact for the street closures is less than what's going to be happens for Salmon Days, because Sunset is still open and available for access to businesses towards the back. So look forward to kind of questions along that later. Next slide. And really exciting, two Fridays ago, we kicked off or showed that for the first time the Issaquah Shop Local new campaign logo and slogan. So we're looking at it's called Issaquah Loyal, and it's Dine, Shop, and Share is our main top line message. And if you go to the next slide, we can see a little bit more. We plan on using this logo not just as a city, but again, with all of our vision partners and with every business in the city will have access to be able to utilize this this logo and slogan to leverage their marketing as well. So we are this is a basic poster that we're going to be printing up and distributing throughout the city. We're also looking at creating some banners, looking at street pole banners. We're looking at creating opportunities for businesses to easily share on Facebook, social media posts that are paid advertising. And we're working with our vision partners to take a portion of this and implement in their own communities in their own way. We've had interest in creating kiosk posters up in the Highlands. We've had interest from the Chamber to utilize their Chamber newsletter opportunity to get the word out, and from Downtown Issaquah Association to do leverage some of the media and marketing that they plan on doing. I will ask Autumn Monahan, who's actually been the forefront of this marketing experience, if there's anything else she'd like to add on that.
Hi there, my name's Autumn Monahan. I'm the assistant to the city administrator, and I've been assisting Jen and the ED team on creating this Buy Local campaign. Jen did a great job of describing how we'll be using these visuals. We also are looking into things like a banner over Front Street, and then even creative ways to have like a frame that you can share around your Facebook profile to show that you're Issaquah loyal. So we are very excited that all of our vision partners are behind this and are loving the visuals, and now we're just working on implementation.
Great, thank you, Autumn.
Yeah.
Next slide. I think that is the end of mine. Yes. Okay.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go back to City Administrator Bobkowitz.
Yes, and I'm going to keep things moving and ask Autumn to pick up on the rest of the presentation regarding the communication efforts we've made during the COVID-19 crisis. Autumn?
Thank you. So once again, my name is Autumn Monahan. I lead our communications team. Next slide, please. So the task force had several goals involving communications, developing what to expect messaging as restaurant services change, more extensive sharing of city reopening plans, better public health messaging, messaging specifically for non-English speaking members of our community, more extensive use of social media, and better utilization of our cable TV channel. Next slide, please. So we have used a variety of communication tools during this pandemic to reach different audiences in our community, which I'll touch on briefly tonight. The first is our website. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have redesigned the homepage of our website, so there are several ways you can easily find our dedicated COVID-19 webpage. There is also a black banner across every page on our website. So no matter if you enter our site through the homepage or through a Google search, if say you were searching for Issaquah day camps or any other services, no matter how you enter our website, you will always see that black banner across the top of the page that includes a link to the COVID-19 page. So for months, we were updating this webpage daily. Now we are also updating it whenever there's new news for our community. We have subpages dedicated for business resources, how to help others, where to go if you need help, and details on modified transportation. Next slide, please. We also have content that features public health safety information, specific testing locations in our area, changes to city and park services, information on the King County facility for patients that's located in Issaquah, and a translation on some key health messages. And as a reminder, you can also translate any web page on our website at the footer, at the bottom of our site. Next slide, please. So from early March to about last week, here are statistics on our website traffic. Our entire site has seen more than 100,000 unique visitors. Our COVID page has been immensely popular with close to 40,000 page views. And we have more than 2,000 subscribers for our emergency alerts, which we've opted to use a few times during this pandemic. So while we run a variety of social media accounts for the city, I'm going to cover the ones we focused on during the pandemic tonight. All the data I'll be sharing with you runs from early March to last week, and it's important to note that we've had other news to share with the community that has been outside of COVID-19. So these stats include everything that's been happening in the past few months. The city has 3 separate Twitter accounts, and so these metrics are for all 3. Twitter is our go-to for breaking news here at the city. And as a reminder, you don't need an account to see our tweets. In fact, all of our newest tweets are embedded on our homepage of our website for all community members to see. So between those 3 accounts, we've had 1.4 million impressions, which that's how many times our content has been displayed in someone's newsfeed. We've also had 56,000 interactions, which are comments or likes or shares. We've welcomed 2,400 new followers to these platforms, or to these accounts, and we have close to 13,000 followers on Twitter. For Facebook, we've had more than 300,000 impressions with 30,000 interactions. We've welcomed close to 250 new followers, and we've had close to 60,000 video views. Video is definitely our most powerful tool that we have on Facebook, so that's been very successful as we've produced video content. Amazingly, almost half of the households here in Issaquah, next slide, please. Almost half of the households in Issaquah have a Nextdoor account now. So this is a private social media platform for neighbors to interact with each other, but agencies like the city can also run accounts and post information that appears in residents' feeds, as well as appear in email notifications if they've subscribed to them. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, video is our most powerful communication tool online, and it's been really successful during this pandemic. In the past 3.5 months, people have watched our videos for a collective of 1,800 hours on YouTube alone. So this does not include views on our other social platforms like Facebook, where we also upload those videos directly. So developing video during a pandemic can be challenging, but we have gotten creative. And we've become quite an expert now in doing very creative videos. So we have developed videos that have included anything, including interviews with Mayor Polly. We have done collections of videos that people have recorded on their cell phones at home and submitted to us from local businesses or from their homes. We've even had tips provided by you, our city council members. Thank you for your participation. And we've also shared a lot of videos from community and meetings like this one. In total, we've sent 18 editions of the mayor's newsletter during the pandemic, which reaches more than 7,000 subscribers. In addition, we have weekly Issaquah Insider newsletters, as well as other newsletter tools directly for certain audiences, including our senior population, our parks and community services customers. And we just started a new economic development newsletter that's targeted only for businesses. We're also starting to experiment with hosting neighborhood engagement meetings virtually to share messaging and answer questions both about the pandemic and about other neighborhood issues, which continue on. So I'll be briefing you further next month on our neighborhood engagement efforts in a separate presentation next month. Printed materials were also developed throughout the pandemic. They can be challenging to hand out during these times of physical distancing, but we have utilized the help of our nonprofit partners like the food bank, which are handing out flyers like these with their food packages. So that has been really helpful. We've also included some messaging on our utility bill envelopes so that people know how to get help with bill assistance. We have also developed a lot of park signage over the past few months, which is posted on site and throughout our parks and recreation facilities. And also, we've been trying to combat social isolation. So our city team has so many personal connections with our community members through the services that they provide. And so we're working to offer that connection virtually through things like preschool teachers, reading books on video, or offering a virtual learning lab for our seniors. And so all of this content is also recorded and posted to our YouTube channel so that our broader community can also enjoy it. Since the pandemic has started, we've been tracking phone calls as far as how many phone calls are coming into our main line of 425-837-3000. And we also created a new broad email account that just was help@issaquah.gov, just so that it was super easy for people if they had specific questions to reach the city. So far we've had 1,500 calls, which I assure you are not all about COVID-19 or our pandemic response, but a lot of general city business. And then 150 emails, and most of them have been specific to questions around COVID and our response. So what's next? A lot of our focus will be around what happens when our community reopens. So here's an example of us partnering with our Parks and Community Services Department on educating our community about what it's like to now go to our new and different farmers market. So we will be doing a lot more of this type of support for our departments as we start to reopen other city services and communicate with the public what's changed, what's open, or what may still be modified or closed.
City Administrator Bobkowitz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next issue is community health. Next slide, please.
Actually, City Administrator, we do have some questions showing up in the queue. I'm wondering if you want to take them at the topic level or at the end of the presentation as a whole.
That's up to you and the council, Madam Mayor.
Well, I will just ask. Councilmember DiMichele, would you like to ask your question now or wait till the end of the presentation?
I'll ask it now. Autumn, you mentioned better public health messaging, and one of my big concerns is as we go into recovery that people will start to feel that the virus is no longer with us or start to take things for granted or think that it's gone. And so I'm just wondering if you could just speak a little bit to that one bullet about better public health messaging, and are we cooperating with King County on making sure that people are aware that the virus is still with us?
Yes, thank you for that question. We definitely are coordinating with Public Health of Seattle and King County, and I feel so fortunate that we have them as a resource for us as our public health agency. They have a very large communications team that provides us all of our public health messaging, a lot of times with graphics or with videos or other materials that we can repurpose and use as a city. As the city's PIO, I'm also on very often on calls with fellow PIOs throughout the region, and I also receive a daily update that's specific to just King County PIOs on anything from what's going on in the media, what they're covering, to what messaging is coming out from public health or from the county or state, or any type of messaging that, again, that we can repurpose for our community. And so that's one thing as regional PIOs, as a group, that we've been talking about, is how to continue sharing that safety messaging as these reopening phases have started.
Thank you, Autumn. And PIO is Public Information Officer, for those who are not aware of that acronym. And thank you for that question, Councilmember DiMichele. I am hearing from members in the community who have specific health vulnerabilities, wanting to make sure that these messages continue, even though the sun is out and people are feeling good and they're getting to do new things, that we are in a pandemic and we need to adjust to that. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, Administrator Bobkowitz.
Thank you. This next area is regarding community health. I think a nice segue to what we were just talking about. Obviously, the Seattle King County Health Department is the health department for the city of Issaquah. The task force has been very concerned about getting Issaquah only information. And so actually at this week's meeting of the Recovery Task Force, we will be meeting with representatives from the King County Health Department, as well as our own Swedish Issaquah Hospital, to try to get a little bit more information about that, get more information about what county plans, Swedish plans are for testing sites. As far as the PPE, I think you might have heard the Chamber of Commerce, they received a large shipment of PPE from King County. The city is also expecting a shipment, and so we are working with local businesses, and ultimately we'll work with members of the community if they need masks, that will make that available. So this is an area that continues focus, and we'll continue to report more to the City Council. Next slide. Human Services, Monica Negrell, our Human Services Coordinator, has been doing an outstanding job of dealing with lots of aspects of the impact on individuals by the COVID-19 crisis. Monica, look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, City Administrator. Good evening, everyone. My name is Monica Negrell, and I will be focusing on Human Services. Next slide, please. So the priority areas identified by the task force include supporting vulnerable populations, such as seniors and residents with various health conditions or disabilities, landlord and tenant assistance. Here we will include not only funding for rental assistance, but we will be exploring policy alternatives that could be implemented at city and or county level. Mental health resources. Here we've been supporting our nonprofits with expanding capacity or changes in operations, as well as promoting and communicating updates to our residents. And finally, creating creative solutions for those in isolation, either establishing special programs or adjusting existing programs to adapt to the new conditions. We know, as I think Autumn mentioned earlier, there are already online programs that we made available to senior citizens. However, we are aware that there are many seniors with no access to online platforms, and therefore we must reach those who are in complete isolation. So we'll be looking at that as well. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So next I will provide a brief update and additional details on some of the initiatives that we've been working on already, and as well as some of the upcoming proposed actions. So at the end of March, Council allocated $100,000 towards rental assistance. And at the same time, we started convening the Issaquah Food Security Collaborative, which is a group of 7 local entities providing food and basic needs assistance to residents, including seniors and vulnerable adults. At the same time, we started convening, at the same time, in addition, we started supporting our nonprofit partners and also our residents, providing resources and referrals. We can move to the next slide. Specifically for the rental assistance program, we for the $100,000, those were allocated by the end of May, and 205 households benefited from this program, with 91% of those who requested assistance experiencing layoffs or reduced work hours. On the graph, you see kind of like a visual of the households that were served during the program. The low number of households that you see for the month of May served by the Issaquah Community Services reflects the organization's completion of the program and not a decrease in need. So you just see one of the organizations distributed the money sooner than the other. And I can provide additional questions about this. I can provide additional answers if there are questions on this for sure. I just see a comment in the text box, so I don't know if I should stop now or if I...
Well, let's just check in. Thank you, Monica. Councilmember Goodman, would you like to wait till we get through this presentation or ask your question now?
I'd like to ask my question now because I think it's about this. I think it's about this slide.
Thanks.
Monica, can you remind us what the requirements were for the $100,000 of rental assistance that we previously allocated?
Yes, absolutely. So residents who were impacted by COVID-19, either through layoffs, reduced hours, or health-related or other related problems, were eligible. Also, in terms of eligibility requirements, they had to have a income level of 80% AMI or below. And the other details of the program were that those eligible residents could receive assistance of up to $500 per month for up to 3 months in rental assistance.
500?
Councilmember
Yes,
Goodman.
500. Mm-hmm.
500. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Hunt would also like to chime in with a question.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. Could you give us a overview of what the need levels were in terms of the percent AMI for the households that were served by the program?
Yes, absolutely. Over 75%, actually 77% of those who received assistance, their AMI level was at or below 50%. And so the other 23% or so had AMIs between 50 and 80%. So definitely, I think those who have very low income in our area were those who really needed the assistance. And would you like me to go into further details, or does that?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Monica, you can, let's go to Councilmember Hall for a question before Monica starts your presentation again. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. Super quick one. This is Zach Hall. Monica, can you give us a sense of, are people still reaching out and trying to apply for this program and realizing that we've exhausted the funds? Or
yes, very good
need that we're sensing in the community? Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very good question. I am staying in touch with our organizations, and they continue to provide monthly updates on their needs. Yes, the needs continue to stay the same at this point. They do expect an increase in the upcoming months, especially they are especially concerned about the time when the moratorium eviction is going to be lifted. So at this time, the needs are about the same, and they are able to serve them with their existing money. The Issaquah Community Services has about a little bit over $200,000 per year to allocate. That's from their own fundraisers. And St. Vincent de Paul has about $50,000 from their own funds to allocate. However, yes, there is a concern that the money will run out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. continue with your presentation, Monica. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. So as I was saying earlier, in March, we also created the Issaquah Food Collaborative. Should I stop for a question?
Councilmember Ray, is it on this slide, or would you like to ask a question on the last slide?
It was the last slide. I'm just a little slow.
Sure. If we can back it up, thank you. Councilmember Ray.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. Thanks, Monica. Do you have any data on what other programs that the county or the state are providing in terms of rental assistance, similar to what we're doing?
Yes, a little bit. So perhaps council members are aware of the United Way funding that became available soon after council allocated the $100,000. So there were several $1 million allocated towards that program. Unfortunately, because of the high need, the money were gone in a couple of days. So that program is currently on hold, and they're working on identifying additional funds. In addition, of course, multiple other cities on their own created rental assistance programs. And the Seattle Foundation had a couple of rounds of funding, some of them being allocated towards rental assistance. In this second round of funding, there was, I believe there were 3 million. I can't remember exactly the total amount of money that was allocated towards rental assistance through a competitive process. However, none of our local nonprofits received assistance through that fund. So I think these are the ones that I'm familiar with right now.
Is there anything coming from the state specifically targeting rental assistance right now?
Rental assistance, not that I'm aware of right now, other than, of course, the moratorium was there. And I know that at the city level, there are advocacy groups, including legal assistance programs, who are working on giving us local jurisdictions and the county ideas on what policies we may implement in helping with that as an alternative to rental assistance. As everyone understands, unfortunately, rental assistance is not a long-term investment or something that can be sustainable. And so therefore, we are looking at those alternatives instead.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you, Deputy Council President Ray. Monica, let's move to the next slide.
Okay, yes, thank you. So along with the rental assistance program, we also started the Issaquah Food Security Collaborative. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a group of 7 local entities. It includes nonprofits, but also the school district and the Issaquah Senior Center that we as a city staff are convening. And we are meeting regularly to discuss changes in operations, supply needs, changes in population and services, along with staffing, volunteers, and financial resources that they might need. And I can, of course, provide additional details, but I'm going to move to the next slide. And part of the food collaborative, we created a dashboard, which is a brief snapshot of where the group is as a whole in terms of these criteria that we identified. And we are using the dashboard as an advocacy tool for additional funding. For example, I know that Mayor Polly was successful in securing donations from Costco towards the food bank. And so we hope to continue to use the dashboard as an advocacy tool, but we are also looking at changes over time and tracking data, hoping that the data that we track will help us implement changes in the upcoming months. We can move to the next slide. So this one just provides a brief snapshot on how drastically, right in March, as the pandemic hit, organizations had a drastic drop in volunteers and their staff. They are currently functioning at about 41 to 43% of their staff or volunteers. The significant drop is due mainly to volunteers either being seniors or having health conditions, or due to the stay-home order and the physical distancing requirement if organizations, for example, don't have enough space to accommodate multiple volunteers, that they cannot schedule them. Also, for example, the school district had, due to the homestay order, a significant change in staffing. So many of the staff had to stay home, although they had the expenses of having to pay the staff. We can move to the next slide. Sorry, my phone is buzzing for whatever reason. When I don't need it to buzz. Again, I apologize. So this slide provides a brief snapshot of the population served and the volunteer capacity changes over time. So as I mentioned earlier, the staffing and volunteers have dropped significantly in March. However, we did not see the same drop in the population served or the services that the organizations needed to provide. Some of you might ask why we still saw a small decrease in the population served, and that is because some of the organizations that in this food collaborative, they serve seniors. And so, for example, the Issaquah Senior Center had to close services and can now only provide food services. Some of the seniors are isolated at home and they cannot leave. So that is one of the examples. However, although we saw initially a small decrease in the services provided or in the population served, that started increasing in April and May. In May, we already see an increase that's over. Organizations serve more population, more residents than they would do in normal times. And not only they serve more residents, but what they also noticed is that sometimes the same residents that they serve have higher needs than prior. So if maybe in the past someone would come to the food bank once a month, now they see that the same resident might come every other week. So they need help more often than before. Next slide. This is just another brief snapshot of kind of like seeing the changes in reduction, in changes in volunteers over time. We can move to the next slide. This is a helpful visual of what it means to have significant support from the community during crisis. So, for example, the food bank received a lot of community support in the last couple of months, which is very helpful, and it shows how it can help bridge the gap and fill the gap where revenues have dropped significantly or where expenses have increased. However, there is a concern that the support that the food bank received over the last couple of months is not sustainable long term. And there is also a shared concern that if all the other organizations will not receive assistance, the gap between expenses and revenues will continue to increase and will put in danger those services that are absolutely needed in our community. And again, the food collaborative, I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, the 7 entities include not only the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank, but Issaquah Meals Program, that is the Catholic Community Services Program, as well as the Weekend Community Meals Program, Eastside Baby Corner, Eastside Friends of Seniors, the school district, and of course the Issaquah Senior Center. And we can move to the next slide. Although we focused a lot on planning and supporting the organizations with operations and changes in staffing needs and resources. Really, I would like to highlight a few of the successes of this collaborative. The community donations have increased. The community really responded to the requests. The volunteer groups stepped forward. We had amazing church groups that provided assistance from PPEs to to-go boxes, as well as businesses in the community who helped with other packaging items and even donating meals, and also additional funding opportunities. I mentioned earlier the Seattle's Foundation funding. The food bank received some funding through those funds early on, and so those have been successful for sure. And so moving forward, also moving to the next slide, some of the key questions that we are going to continue asking ourselves as we continue to work with not only the Food Collaborative, but with the other nonprofits in human services. We are going to be looking at how the unemployment rates will impact the needs in the community, and how our residents who continue to be impacted by the unemployment rates will need services, and how can we adjust those services to meet the needs of the residents. We are also going to look at the transition planning for the nonprofits, as the entire community is looking at reopening phases. We are aware that these nonprofits never closed their doors, and so actually they had to change their operations overnight and assist more residents or assist the same residents with more needs. And therefore, as everybody's looking at reopening, these organizations will continue to focus on short-term and immediate response while planning long-term also. So that impacts staffing and resources as well. We are also going to be looking at the community support and asking ourselves if those generous community members who've been able to step forward and make donations early on, are they going to be able to sustain those donations? And with that, fundraising, those are questions that we are going to continue to work with our nonprofits, especially as their biggest fundraisers are yet to come, and most of them have been canceled. Many organizations, for example, have fundraisers during the Salmon Days, during the 4th of July events, and other events during the fall. All of them have been canceled, and so they are working on reshifting those fundraisers. Some of the online fundraising events we have heard have been very successful, some others not so much. So definitely a lot of question marks and support needed there. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we will continue to focus on how could we support the vulnerable populations, especially those seniors, those with significant health concerns and disabilities who, although we are slowly getting out of the house, they will remain isolated in their homes with not being able to access some of the community resources that are available. And next slide, please. So I think just summarizing here, we will continue on both short-term goals and continuing to respond to the crisis as needed, supporting both our nonprofits and our residents, while also looking at the long-term planning and the impact long-term. And I think I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Monica. I am seeing, let's see, we left off with Deputy Council President Ray. So, Councilmember Hall, did you get to ask your question?
No, I haven't yet, Mayor Polly.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Councilmember Zach Hall. Thank you very much, Monica. So appreciate you and Director Watling's work in this world, especially with the Food Collaborative. It's really been great. I had a question with you about that, and I know the school district has been an incredible partner in the community on providing nutritious food to kiddos and families. do we know, is there any word whether or not the school district will continue to be providing food assistance over the summer given developments with USDA?
Yes, thank you for that question. Unfortunately, from what we heard from the school district, they will not be providing services over the summer. However, I know that the food bank is providing their summer break program, so they will. They are working and they have the capacity and the resources in place to step in and support that program for the summer.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Next, Councilmember Goodman, followed by Hall. Councilmember Goodman next, followed by Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. Monica, thanks for all the great information. Appreciate it. You mentioned the residential rental assistance as not a long-term sustainable investment. But so I wondered if you could talk about that a bit and linking it to, you've also mentioned a couple times alternative policies, which I took to mean as potentially a more effective way of getting housing security rather than looking to rental assistance for accomplishing that.
Yes, thank you. So the rental assistance program, while very, very helpful on a short-term basis, doesn't seem to create long-term solutions just because, for example, by providing $500 in rental assistance to a resident who owns or whose rent is about $2,000 per month, while it's helpful, it doesn't solve their challenge. And also, we are aware that the need is much greater than the resources that we have. So in an ideal situation, I think it would be great to look and try to identify bigger picture solutions to look at the challenges not only that the residents have, but what causes them to be pushed out of low-income housing or affordable housing, looking at what assistance maybe landlords might need, and then also looking at, county and state policies in place. Of course, from the research that I did so far, I don't think that there is one state that found a magic cure. I do know from talking to some of the legal assistance programs that we have in the area that they are looking at some initiatives that San Francisco did or the state of New York and trying to look at those. I don't have much specific information at this point. We are waiting to hear for a proposal from them. I know that the city of Seattle recently looked at some initiatives that they could do after August regarding evictions and not allowing evictions unless they are just under certain conditions. So I apologize if I'm not giving you a very specific answer, but at this point, kind of like these are the things that we are looking at.
No, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Monica. Many unknowns at this time. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. My question was very similar. So I was going to ask about what the sorts of policies you were looking at in the long-term planning phase. And so I think just now you talked about policies around eviction prevention. I believe the one you referred to for San Francisco, they prevented evictions from coronavirus-related causes. Is that right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So eviction prevention, and then was there any other sorts of policies that you've been looking at that you think we council might consider in the long term?
Eviction prevention for evictions. I know that there have been. It depends on what other tenant rights or affordable housing programs. Nothing specific though at this point. I would love to come back to council with more specific proposals once I feel a little bit more prepared and just diving into those.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Monica. Are you at the end of your portion of the presentation?
I believe so.
Thank you. Administrator Bobkowitz.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Next slide, please. After post-recovery planning. So this is an area that the Recovery Task Force really hasn't had an opportunity to dive into. We are going to start talking with businesses in the community next month about some of the experiences they're having. Actually, at the July 9th meeting of the task force, we'll be hearing both from the Tiger Mountain Zoo, Cougar Mountain Zoo, excuse me, and as well as the Village Theater to get a sense of what they're doing to prepare for change. So this is something that we'll continue to be talking with the task force about, and we'll come back to the council with further information in the next few weeks and months. The last area is under community engagement. What are we doing to get our community programs and facilities back up and running? And Jeff Watling, our Parks Community Services Director, and has that last portion of the presentation. Jeff?
Great, thanks, City Administrator Bobkowitz. Yeah, last but not least, in terms of area focus is community engagement. Next slide. Before sharing some of the recovery planning we've been working on in terms of our city infrastructure and services, wanted to highlight these broad goals that the Recovery Task Force identified and generated for community engagement. Some of which you'll see have already beginning to take root in some of the conversations that you've heard from fellow staff in terms of some of the work that's already going on. Areas of developing ways that people can safely get out and begin to connect in the community. Ideas for recovery themes and signage to support not only businesses but community. Collaboration with other cities, opportunities to survey our residents for what their recovery priorities are, sharing schedules, not only schedules of city-based events and programs, but any and all community-based events and programs and initiatives as those begin to occur more frequently as we get to some of the later or future phases. Ideas and opportunities to create community spirit, increase community confidence as we're beginning to come together and still stay safe and healthy. Opportunities to network and to celebrate some of our local talent and resources. Ideas for reactivating youth sports. You'll hear about that a little bit with some of the modified field rentals that we just initiated. In fact, today is the first day of that. And lastly, how do we celebrate 4th of July, given that we'll still likely be in this phase 2 world come that time, but how can we creatively support the community celebrating such an event as that? Next slide. What this slide represents, and I'll sort of use this as my visual to talk about the approach we've taken as stewards and managers of the community's public parks and spaces, programs and facilities. As we've both navigated these facilities into the closure and during the closure, it's really become pretty apparent to us as staff. Our most agile work is now as we begin to come out and come out of COVID and focus on recovery. Some of the areas and themes that have been really important to us as staff and working with administration, the mayor and City Administrator Bobkowitz, are first safety. How do we encourage public safety given that we are not out of a pandemic yet? We remain in a pandemic, and though we're shifting from stay home, stay healthy, how do we now come together and stay healthy? How do we make informed decisions, allowing ourselves to
rely on most current information when it comes to restarting programs, facilities, public spaces, thus allowing us to be agile and responsive to those changes and community needs. And then also recognize that it's a really broad mix of services and public infrastructure that we manage, and that they all have different rates of reopening. It's pretty clear and will be clear as we go through these phases. This grid or this visual you maybe have already seen or familiar with. This is something that we worked with communications on to create a bit of a snapshot to reflect and represent the changes that are being made and the planning that we are taking in sort of this month by month decision points as new information is made available. I would point out as I go over this that this very grid is updated today from what was in your packet last week, and this now reflects some of the new news today in terms of reopening of playgrounds and restrooms, some of the field scheduling that we're now doing in a modified scale to sports groups, both youth and adult sports groups that can meet the phase 2 guidelines of small groups, but being able to reserve space and begin to use those field spaces again. I won't go through each of these columns, but happy to certainly answer questions. You'll see on the far left some of the green lights that we already have opened. Farmers Market we just celebrated our third Saturday this last Saturday. Though market looks different, if you've had a chance to go visit it, it's been very well attended. The first week we had 1,200 visitors in a very much more managed fashion. We had a few more vendors this last Saturday. We continue to see a great response and feedback from the community in terms of the market. Summer day camps will actually start on Wednesday. Kathy Jones and our recreation staff have done a great job of working with public health and coming up with a very safe and modified way to offer those daycare services through our summer day camps. So looking ahead, some of the work that we still see coming in terms of our recreation facilities, those we don't see fully opening in them until phase 3 is what public health is telling us, though the one difference there is public pools have been allowed to open in a modified fashion. So we have been working diligently with our staff and public health to put the facility together. We have to establish a reservation system. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to this news coming out. So July 6th, I'm happy to announce that the pool will be open in a safe, modified way. So again, the grid is meant to be something that is convertible as new news happens, and something that's relatively easy in sort of a green light, yellow light, red light fashion. The last item I'd point out on this, unfortunately, some of our events are larger events that we knew were going to need to wait for phase 4. Shakespeare on the Green, our vendor Woodnow Productions, who puts those on, has already let us know that they're going to be canceling all their productions that they do in various cities, including Issaquah. We've been working very closely with our summer concerts on the Green partners. Earlier last month, we had made the decision to cancel July. We just met today, this afternoon. August is not looking that good. Knowing again, we would need to be in a phase 4. We'll know in the coming days, but that likely could be a decision. Though we're seeing some green lights in terms of what we're able to open up. Unfortunately, this year we'll also see some cancellations likely that we're going to need to make as we navigate and manage these changing waters.
So Director Watling, we may take a pause. There's a couple of questions on this slide. We'll start first with Councilmember Mark.
Thank you, Director Watling. I had a question. I'm having a little bit of a hard time reading you've got things listed by phases, but you've also got some specific programs listed above those phases. And I guess my question is, do we know what we're going to do if we actually move back down the phase list? If there are concerns out this week that we may be entering a second wave of COVID, and if we were to unfortunately move back to phase 1.5 or phase 1, I see things like playgrounds and park restrooms. That whole thing is green. So skate parks, sport courts, shelters, modified field rentals, that's all green. So does that mean that as long as we're in at least phase 2, all the stuff that's above phases 1, 1.5, and 2 are going to be open?
A great point and great question, Councilmember Martz. Clearly, public health has been our guidance and our guide throughout this process. Obviously, if circumstances change, situations change, and we need to pull back some of this reopening, we want to stay and will stay very agile and informed. And if facilities need to either close or programs not be offered or be reduced, that would be reflected in this as well. So you bring up an excellent point. Green is showing in August and September. I guess that's given our current news and our current information. Should that information change, this would change as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Walsh. Director Watling, I just wanted to give you kudos on such clear communication here. And I would encourage the city to adopt similar visuals, because certainly seeing the numerous conversations and questions on social media about when are parks opening. And so it's really nice to be able to have this type of information that we can share. That being said, what you did say was this had just gotten updated. And so I was going to ask the question, where does this live on the site for the most updated version? And then I went to go look at the site, and I noticed that the version that's up there is not the same one that you're sharing. So if we could figure out where that lives and how it gets updated, and then also I would very much appreciate, so that I know which version is the most recent, to have an updated date in the bottom. So I don't know if there's another place it lives on the site that I wasn't seeing.
All great points. We'll continue to work with communications. This is intended to live on the website, the COVID website home that Autumn Monahan mentioned earlier. Like I said, this is apologize. This is fresh. This is a fresh update that will need to be plugged into the website tonight as well. I think the date stamp is an excellent point, given sort of the week-to-week status that we're in right now. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director Watley. That is an excellent suggestion, Councilmember Walsh, and great question from Councilmember Martz. None of this is cast in stone, as you know. We could be floating around for a little while, so those are really good points. I'm not seeing any more questions. Director Watling, did you have more information to present?
Next slide, just real quick, as I mentioned before, just today, play areas and restrooms. Restaurants are open too, but restrooms were opened as of today. Currently, we don't have any restaurants in our public parks. Sorry for that. And I mentioned earlier about the modified pool opening. We intend to announce that publicly. We've certainly shared it with our very avid and interested pool users. We will we'll broadcast a public announcement of that once we have the reservation system sort of troubleshooted and ready to go, because I know once we make that announcement, folks will be calling and want to reserve their lap time. So we look for making that announcement later this week. Next slide. Oh,
question.
Any further questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Director Watling. I'll give the council members a second to use the chat box to indicate whether or not they have additional questions. But I wanted to thank you for spending the time to even update the information from Friday. Sometimes it does feel like things are just changing faster than we can even get them down on paper. So thank you for that.
Yep.
I am not seeing questions. I'll head back to Administrator Bobkowitz if there's any closing comments.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We appreciate your patience. We went through a lot of information this evening, but we felt it was important to give you and the community an overview of where we stand with all the various factors regarding the recovery. The Recovery Task Force will continue to meet for the foreseeable future. If people are interested in learning more about the Recovery Task Force, they can go on our website. The meetings are streamed live and they're available on YouTube afterwards. People can stay apprised of that. We are talking about public health issues with representatives from Seattle King County Health and Sweeps Hospital this coming Thursday. So I would encourage people to tune in. So, Madam Mayor, unless there are any final questions, we're ready to move on to the next item.
Thank you, City Administrator. I'm not seeing anything, but I do want to add in the Mayor's 2 cents. This has been probably the most rewarding part of the work that we have been doing over the last few months for me, because it's been an opportunity to tap into the community and have a task force made up of invested community members brainstorm how to do something we have never done before. If you have not watched the meetings, they're fantastic. Incredible ideas, incredible energy, incredible passion for the community and compassion for those that are affected by the pandemic. So for staff who presented the work tonight and to the task force, I owe a huge personal thank you. Huge. It's just been the positive point of the work in the last few months. The next item on our agenda is AB 7993, temporary regulatory relief for businesses, use of sidewalk, private property, and signage. And the council action this evening is a request to adopt ordinances related to that. I'd like to invite Economic Development Coordinator Jen Davis-Hayes back up to present this item.
Good evening. So we briefly addressed these 2 topics during the Recovery Task Force presentation. So again, there are 2 separate ordinances. They are not related to the Front Street closure. The one is about the opportunity for businesses to be able to have a quicker review process through our permitting center for use of sidewalks or private properties for their business operations. Again, we are requesting a waiver of the fees to assist businesses during this way. And then the second one is to allow the temporary suspension of the movable A-frame, the movable A-frame signage for businesses to utilize during this business operations. And both of them are looking at suspending the current code for 6 months. Tisha has probably a motion that she can read.
Yes, I believe Tisha has placed the motions in the chat box so that when we have a council member prepared to move it, I'm not sure if we need to read them in right now or this is just to be helpful when council gets to that point. I'm going to move, Jen, if you're done presenting the 2 ordinances, I was going to ask Council President Hunt if she had received any public comment that had been emailed to council on these topics that she would like to share this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we did receive some email correspondence on the topic. We received an email of a resident who expressed concern about that having these signs and the changes to the code to allow for the use of the sidewalks in this way would contribute to an atmosphere of clutter, and also was concerned about cigarette butts on the sidewalks and other sort of the businesses using the sidewalks more being concerned about that. And then earlier, before the ordinance, we did receive support for making it easier to put up A-frame signs for restaurants so that they can more easily promote their restaurants. That concludes the correspondence on this.
Thank you very much. I'll head back over to Jen for a second and find out. I know there was information in an agenda bill, including the ordinance language. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with council before we look for someone to make a motion?
I don't believe so. There seems like there's some questions, though.
There are some questions showing up. Let's start first with Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I wondered about the 6-month time frame. So we don't currently know what phase we're going to be in for how long. There are just a lot of unknowns, and so the 6 months. Would council simply adopt an ordinance if we wanted to roll back this or change it? We would just adopt a separate ordinance if circumstance change. And I am going to call a friend and see if Jim Haney is able to answer how if we want to change the effective date, if that would require another ordinance change or something different. Is Jim available?
Yes, I'm here. This is Jim Haney. Two things. One, if you wanted to make this shorter, you could do that at any time by adopting an ordinance repealing the ordinances that are before you. If you want to extend them, you need to hold another public hearing before extending them at the end of 6 months, and then you could extend them for up to 6 months thereafter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. Jen, I'm looking at the form of the permit application. Obviously, on page 3 of the agenda bill, or on the ordinance, it says the form of the permit application shall contain at a minimum the following information, and there's 14 items. And then also after that, it talks about specific criteria that needs to be met. And I'm going to ask questions about that in a moment. But first, this ordinance is not, correct me if I'm wrong, is not specifically limited to Front Street businesses in the streetery?
That is correct. This is for any business throughout the city.
Okay. My question about the application for numbers 1 through 14, I'm curious if all of these things are necessary on the application. And the reason I'm asking is because there's a lot of information that's requested, and I just don't know. I'm just questioning whether all of it's necessary. I can see the name and address and phone number of the applicant and the location of the business, but description of the area to be used, dates and times, intended use of the space, proposed lighting, number of tables and chairs, planned use of tents or canopies. I can understand making sure we got the correct license and the insurance, but looking to be a little less onerous. So I'm wondering if you or Jim Haney can provide information about whether we could make this potentially less onerous, and for the restaurants that are, the businesses are on Front Street that plan on utilizing this, isn't the plan closure just in a few days, so they only have a few days to compile all this information and have it be approved and reviewed and approved? So that's my concern with 1 through 14.
Okay, thank you. So regarding, I'll answer your last question first. Businesses that are going to be doing the streetery do not need to apply because they're covered under the special events permit. So that's a different avenue. This is if they would want to have outdoor seating on their sidewalks and their private parking lots Sunday through Thursday, basically, and year round. Well, as long as, throughout the year. So those restaurants or businesses are not required to do this because they are covered under the special events permit. As far as the number of things, and so I actually worked with development services staff today on the actual application. It basically is about a page, and there's a lot of attestations saying I am attesting that I have this, I have that. So it was under their recommendation to include these items. We could look, I think some of the things like tents are important for our fire chief or fire staff to make sure that if they're not putting too many tents together, that they cause a fire concern. But some of the other ones, I think, they believed it was important to understand the use, that if things kind of were used differently, they at least kind of said, you said you were going to do X, Y, Z, and now you're doing something different. So I don't know if there's something, I know you listed a lot of them. If there's something specific that you think is really, you don't think is necessary, or that we should research more specifically.
Well, I guess if I was going to do anything, and thanks for the explanation, if I was going to do anything, it says shall contain at a minimum the following information. And to me, it seems like it should contain at most the following information, because that means, we send this back and all of a sudden 10 more questions are asked. I'm looking to make it easier. I'm not looking to make it harder. I mean, we have a reputation already of being difficult to deal with, for lack of a better term, and just to speak expeditiously here. And so it looks like a lot. And so if there's some things that we can get away with doing without, then I think we should look at doing that. And the second part of my question has to do with B, the Department of Development Services shall issue the temporary use permit if all of the following criteria are met. And again, there's just a long list here, and it means filling it out, and it also means checking codes and all sorts of stuff. So can we just not have these things be listed as conditions of the permit? The ordinance already says that the city reserves the right to revoke any temporary use permit if any of the provisions of 3B are not complied with. So why couldn't we just list on the permit, these are the conditions, and if you don't comply, then we have the right to revoke it, rather than having us do all the work. The burden on the applicant, and the burden really is on the applicant to make sure that they comply. And so it seems to be onerous to make, I can just see city staff, let's see if this complies with all these codes. I've been through that process. It's not a fast process. So again, my concern is whether it's too onerous on businesses. I'd like it to be the least possible during this time, because we're trying to get businesses back up on their feet as much as possible. And then also, so it's not too onerous on staff. So long and the short on B, maybe this is a question for Haney, is that possible that we can just have conditions rather than a checklist that somebody has to go over and verify when the permit is issued?
Yes, this is Jim Haney. First, let me comment on the list in A. And again, I think a lot of that was to try to make sure that a number of those things were try to make sure that we had the information necessary to satisfy fire code and ensure that fire code things like, for example, the lighting plan and the tents and so forth. That's really to make sure that fire code issues are taken into account. As far as the criteria, you could put those in conditions of approval. I'm wondering though if it makes more sense though. You could put that in conditions of approval, but if somebody is coming forward, do you want to know that up front if they're coming in and saying, well, this is what I'm going to do, and you're going to issue them a permit? You want to make sure that those things, that these criteria are met. But I could see that you could make them conditions of approval as well.
So it could be included, it could be added to the application, just as an FYI. These will be the conditions of approval, FYI. So then it's also on the permit.
Right.
And I believe most of the ones in B are at the bottom of the application, which is basically they initial, or they're going to do this online. They basically attest that they are going to make sure that safe ingress and egress from the street can be provided, that they are going to make sure they operate safely, et cetera. So I know that one of the discussions with DSD staff and one of the options was to actually to not basically review all this, but again, making sure they provide the information and then base go out to approve the permit and then do a field visit inspection to kind of confirm the information is there. So that's another way to that staff wouldn't be looking at 24 different items and making sure that every little detail is met, but that the general condition for the health and safety and the things that need to be met for fire and health codes are met, or safety codes are met.
Councilmember Goodman, did you want to follow up on that?
No, not right now. Just that I think I'm going to listen to the other questions and comments, and I may be proposing something.
Okay. Thank you. We are moving to Councilmember DeMichelle, followed by Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember DeMichelle, and I would like to follow up on the comments from Council President Hunt. I too am very concerned about the time frame, the 6 months, and if you go through the timeline, this doesn't go into effect, as I understand it, until after the public hearing, which is tentatively proposed for July 20th. And that means that the 6 months would sunset in January sometime. And for our restaurants who are trying to get back up and running, I could foresee that they would need at least another 6 months to be able to take advantage of these next spring and next summer. And so maybe Jim could talk a little bit about this again. Is there some way for the council to indicate that we would like to make this process streamlined so that we don't leave our restaurants in December and January wondering if we're going to hold another public hearing, are we going to approve it again, but instead make this sort of a seamless process that would allow for these changes to be in sync and something that they could rely on for a year. And then I have a follow-up question also on another topic.
Thank you. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, this is Jim Haney. A couple of things in response to Councilmember DeMichelle's questions. First, the ordinances are drafted to go into effect immediately. Assuming that you get a vote of a majority +1 tonight, the ordinance is declared emergency and go into effect immediately so that the city can begin the permit processing immediately. Second, the reason that there is a public hearing on this is because what the city is doing is changing its zoning regulations. And under state law, when you enact an interim regulation changing your zoning regulations, it can be effective for a period of 6 months, or it can be effective for a period of 1 year if you adopt a work plan that can be used to arrive at a permanent change to your regulations. And it didn't seem like to me, as I was drafting these, that we were looking to make a permanent change to the regulations at this point. That's not the reason why we're suspending them or making a temporary change. So that forced us into the position where we have a 6-month time frame for doing this. We can renew the interim regulation in 6 months and renew it for up to an additional 6 months if you wish to do so. But that's the process that's laid out in the state statute.
Oh, all right. All right. Thank you for that. And you actually answered my second question with that answer. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you for that thoughtful question, Councilmember DeMichelle. But I would encourage you to think through the 6-month period about whether or not the council is interested in making some of these things permanent. We're trying something out, but think about if this is the direction you want to go. And that might be the message we'll be able to portray to the business community to make them feel secure that you're behind this and you support this. So thank you. Very good question. Councilmember Walsh, I believe you're up next.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. Can you talk me through the process to, I guess, would you still end up getting a permit for an A-frame sign? or would you then not have to get a permit? Like, what is that process with this adjustment?
Thank you. Jen?
Okay, so we are temporarily suspending the requirement to get a permit for A-frames. So you would not have to apply.
Okay. How would the city be able to determine if there are too many or if they're blocking the path or anything like that if no one is giving us notice that they're putting something out?
Well, just as currently what happens today is sometimes we receive complaints from citizens. Sometimes our code enforcement sees that. Sometimes another city employee sees that and lets code enforcement know. And so we would, so as far as blocking access, that would be something that obviously would still be something we would very much want to implement. The other piece about if it becomes owners too cluttered, that's where we have the opportunity to stop and have that conversation again with the business owner or business district. And I often say, you know, I love that businesses want to put out A-frames, but having 4 A-frame signs for every business would just, you know, not get the same effect as you may think it would. So we reserve the right to go back and then have that conversation with the business. And I don't know if there's other parts of the ordinance that Jim, I did not refer to that.
Well, one thing to note is that it is drafted so that under the current code, a person is limited to 1 A-frame sign, and this removes that limitation. So there isn't a specific limitation if this ordinance is passed on the number of A-frame signs. But if they do become too cluttered, then we would need to go back and either look at the regulation again or work with the property owners to try to cut down on the numbers of signs.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. At this point in time, I'm not seeing additional questions in the chat box. I am wondering if there's anyone that is prepared to make a motion. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I move to adopt ordinance number
2909.
Adopting an interim zoning regulation allowing the temporary use of parking lots, sidewalks, and public rights-of-way to support businesses during the Safe Start Washington Phased Reopening, suspending the operation of certain provisions of the Issaquah Municipal Code during the effective period of the interim zoning regulation, establishing a permit process for such temporary uses, setting the date for a public hearing, declaring an emergency, and establishing an effective date, and 2, adopt ordinance number
2910.
Adopting an interim zoning regulation allowing certain commercial A-frame signs, suspending the operation of certain portions of Issaquah Municipal Code Section 18.11.230 during the effective period of the interim zoning regulation, setting the date for a public hearing, declaring an emergency, and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. I'll second the motion.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. Typically, what we would do is ask the motion maker if they would like to start under the discussion section. However, I have a request from Councilmember Goodman to make comments as well. So, Council President Hunt, did you want to start off the discussion? Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. Unless Councilmember Ray, as the seconder, has comments.
I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned before, I'm interested in making an amendment. And after hearing what Jen said and what Jim Haney said, my purpose in doing this is to make it as least onerous as possible, both on the businesses and on staff, within reason. So, I mean, there's certain information that we have to have, certainly. So, my amendment would be twofold. One, I would make a motion to amend Section 3A of the ordinance to say, instead of at a minimum, I would say at a maximum, the following information. And then on 3B, that the with the following criteria as conditions of approval, and to note the conditions of approval on both the application and the permit.
Councilmember Goodman, if I could get you to state both of those again, it may allow the city clerk to capture your words, as I'm sure she was trying to do.
Sure, of course. So under section 3A of the ordinance, on the last line on page 3, change minimum to maximum. And then on 3B, it says, instead of if all of the following criteria are met, it would be replaced with the following criteria as conditions of approval, and to note the conditions on both the application and the permit.
Thank you. Is there a second for the amendment? Looking in the chat box to see if we have a second. Council President Hunt.
This is Council President Hunt. I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded to make 2 edits to the proposed ordinances. Discussion, and I'll start with Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. The first proposed edit to change minimum to maximum removes any uncertainty we might have, or a business might have, that the application list of requirements for the application could grow and get longer. And the second one is to make it clear, because Jen said that she thinks the conditions are just at the bottom of the application. And so again, it just removes that uncertainty that the applicant doesn't have to fill all that information out, but they are both alerted and ahead of time that those conditions create the ability for the city to revoke a permit that doesn't meet those conditions. And the burden is on the applicant to make sure that they're met. And again, the whole purpose is to make this as less onerous as possible, but then still have a reasonable application process. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions as well. Let's let Council President Hunt chime in.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I have a question for Councilmember Goodman. So when the wording is changed to be maximum, that at a maximum you provide that information, it seems to me that you could read that and provide considerably less than the full list of information, because the max can be anything. If that's the max, then you could do anything less than that. And so I wondered if that was the intent, or if it should, if the intent is just to say we're not asking you for all this, then we're going to ask you for more stuff.
So
Goodman.
I'm not sure that I completely understand your question, but at a maximum means that what we were presented with was that at a minimum, this was going to be asked of businesses as part of the application, which to me means we could go away tonight approving this and the list could grow twofold, which I'm not comfortable with. So I'm not understanding the question, sorry.
Council President Hunt, would you like to take another stab at that?
Yeah, sure. So I don't have the wording in front of me where it says maximum. So could you read it that if the word is changed to maximum, could you read it as that the applicant could provide less than the full list of information? You could provide half or some.
Sure. It says that the form of the permit application shall be approved by the city administrator or his or her designee, and shall contain at a minimum the following information. So the form of the permit application itself could change. So didn't want the permit application to get larger and require more information that's already on this list.
Right. Okay. So the way I read this is that if we put this in, it could in the future contain less than this information if we change it to maximum. It could be, you could ask for just the name and telephone number, for example.
Sure, that's correct. And I think that's possible. And so if they're creating a permit application and they find that some of it's redundant or not necessary, if they get through this process and want to shrink the application a little bit, then I think that's fine. But leaving it up to the discretion to enlarge it, I thought I just was trying to prevent that. But it does not give the applicant as I read it, the ability the applicant to provide information. It just prevents the city from making a more onerous application.
Before we proceed, I want to thank the city clerk for putting that language up there. So if you're watching online, you're able to see what they're talking about. And City Administrator Bobkowitz, you wanted to add something here. And I see also Mr. Haney would like to make a suggestion.
Let's start with Mr. Haney.
Mr. Haney.
So the thought I have is that, and I just heard Councilmember Goodman's intent. If the intent is to say that the administrator can have an application that contains less than the information that is here, then I agree that Councilmember Goodman's language achieves that goal. If the intent is to say that the application shall contain only the information, then I suggest all you need to do is delete the phrase at a minimum or maximum and say the application shall contain the following information. That would mean that the application would contain that information and there would be no less and no more. If you want to give the administrator the authority to add something in the future in case we've forgotten something, then the at a minimum language is the language that should be there.
Councilmember Goodman, do you want to respond with the intent of your amendment?
Well, Jim's first two comments, I think, would be in line with the intent. The last comment is not.
Okay.
Because that fits right into the at a minimum, which I was trying to eliminate.
Okay. City Administrator Bobkowitz, you wanted to provide some comments here as well?
Just to say that we have worked very diligently to make this as easy a process as possible, while still making sure we maintain minimum health and safety requirements. So you have my commitment as the person charged by this ordinance to enforce this, that we will do this with the least amount of information we can. So the council can choose whatever language you think is appropriate, but you have my commitment that we want this to happen. We want this to happen expeditiously, and we're going to do everything in our power to make it so.
Thank you, City Administrator. Councilmember Hall has a comment.
Thanks, Mayor Pauly. This is Zach Hall. Yeah, my head was kind of where Council President Hunt's was too. And actually, I was thinking that this language would mean that the applicant could fill out as little as they wanted to in this list. So I'm seeing now that that's not the case, but I feel like there are a few things. So if the list is at a maximum and administration can create a form with a smaller list of items to be provided, I feel like there are a few things here that we definitely need on the form. And perhaps we don't need to create a section like, these are maybe and these have to be on the form, but perhaps administration could just tell us right now that they plan to have something about the Liquor and Cannabis Board permissions there, because I feel like that's going to be a really important aspect for outdoor seating and stuff like that, and just making sure that businesses are on the same page and everyone knows what's expected of them. And I think that that's an important step. So maybe administration could just comment on that.
City Administrator?
Well, certainly as far as the Liquor and Cannabis Board, we cannot be allowing something that they are not allowing. So we just need to have some confirmation of that. Again, looking at the items, the 14 items, having worked with the outdoor seating, this is the smallest list I have ever seen of things being asked for in having served in 2 other communities where we have had these kind of requirements. So again, you have our commitment, my commitment, that we want these permits to be easy to access, but we also need to make sure that they're safe. We need to make sure that indemnity for the city should anything occur. There are just some basic things that we as a municipal government have to worry about. Again, this is the smallest list I have ever seen in order to do something.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember DeMichelle.
Yes, this is Councilmember DeMichelle. You know, in my past lives, I've had to fill out these kinds of forms, and sometimes they appear onerous, but they also help you plan. And I look at that list and I think, well, what we're doing here is we're showing businesses, these are the things that we want you to do to go through the planning process. And I think in some ways they're very helpful because these are the things that we need to pay attention to. The wording at a minimum, to me, allows the administration some flexibility for those businesses that have special considerations that the city may want to pursue a little bit further with them. I think it just allows the city to pay attention to individual businesses and make alterations in that list if there's something particular to the business that needs to be explored further. So personally, I think the language that is in the ordinance right now is what I would want to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. I am keeping my eye on the chat bar and not seeing that there are any more comments or questions about the amendment. Oh, here they come. Let's go to Councilmember Goodman, followed by Deputy Councilmember Ray.
We can go to Councilmember Ray first. Thanks.
Okay. Deputy Council President Ray.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. I want to go back to intent of the amendment, which is we want to make sure that we create certainty and that we streamline the process. And I think by saying this is the most we're going to ask for in the form is a fine thing to do. I think if there is something burning that we have missed in this list, that the administration decides down the road that, oh my gosh, for these permits we have to have, the number of whatevers in the permit, then we can come back and have that discussion. But going forward, I think the intent of Councilmember Goodman, which I think is right, is to create a sense of certainty that we're not going to change this the next go round. And we have a bit of a history of changing our requirements as we go along. And I think this is not the time to create uncertainty. So I think this makes sense. And, going back to the interpretation from both the city administrator and the city attorney, this is the right language to say, look, this is the most, you can do all of these things on the permit, but this is the most you can do without coming back and asking us for more. And I believe that the city administrator's comments about wanting to do this as lightweight as possible is definitely his intent.
Thank you. I have several people lined up to speak. I'm going to check in with the amendment maker, Councilmember Goodman. Was it your intent to talk now, or did you want to hear the rest of the comments from those that have not yet spoken?
Yeah, we can hear the rest of the comments. Thank you.
Thanks. I am going to go to Councilmember Walsh, followed by Council President Hunt. Councilmember Walsh.
This is Councilmember Walsh. I think on Councilmember Ray's point, I actually think if the idea here is to streamline this for businesses, if the administration, if we put a cap on the number of items that can be asked, and the administration gets notice from the Liquor and Cannabis Board that they need to ask another item, and then it has to come back to council for us to debate and deliberate over, that actually ends up with a worse situation for businesses. So I wonder if there is any clarification there, because I don't want for us to say we want a streamlined situation to have that ultimately stand in the way of things.
Councilmember Walsh, let me see if I can get City Administrator Bobkowitz or Mr. Haney to address whether or not that's the process that would happen. City Administrator Bobkowitz?
You know, certainly, depending on what additional information we would have to request, I think the city administrator has certain authorities that additional information could be requested without council action. I mean, if it was an additional insurance policy, if it was something substantive that would change the intent of the application, then I think we would need to come back to the council. Again, if I may, Madam Mayor, members of the council, let me just reiterate. We've worked very hard to put this together. We understand the urgency that is felt in the community to get this done. We don't want to be overly onerous. Again, we do have certain health and safety things that we need to ask. Jen's already laid this out. It's one page. I don't imagine this is going to be an issue. There are members of the community who are going to be very interested to know what kind of access for Americans with Disability Act issues that there are. We have street furniture, we have other signage, we have utility poles and boxes. All those things are going to have to be taken into account. And so we need to know as much specificity as we can, because we have other laws of the state of Washington and the United States that we have to enforce either directly or indirectly. So with all that said, this is what we do for a living. We want to make it as easy as we can.
Thank you, City Administrator Bobkowitz. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Walsh, or address your concern? Thank you. I am not seeing any other commenters at this point in time. I'm going to come back to Councilmember Goodman.
I see Councilmember Marks.
I believe his was that he does not have a comment.
Oh,
and
sorry.
From Council President Hunt, I believe her question was answered during the last. So it may just be you now.
Yes, sure. So just to clarify, following up on Wally's comments, it doesn't change anything on the form that's already required. So it doesn't, all it does is say that here, this is it. You've worked really hard. You've come up with worked really hard, like you said several times, to come up with this. And like Councilmember Ray said, I've got a pretty long history with the city kind of not doing exactly what you said you want to do. So that's what I come to the table with. So I would be, so it doesn't prevent any of this information from being asked. It just prevents for another list from coming out. But Jim Haney said he had 3 comments and about intent. And I was wondering if he remembers what the first 2 were.
Jim, do you want to come back on and walk through those again?
I will, yes. There are 3 possibilities here. One is if you want to give the administrator authority to potentially add things to this list, if the administrator finds that we've forgotten something, then the current language, add a maximum language, is the appropriate language to use. If you want to make the application contain only the language or the items which are listed, then the thing to do is to eliminate the at a maximum or minimum language altogether and have it just say that the application shall contain the following information, period. And then the third one is if your intent is, as I believe Councilmember Goodman has expressed her intent, which is to say that the administrator would have to come back to the council if they wanted to add anything above this, then the add a maximum language is the appropriate language to use. So those are the 3 options, and whichever the council wants to choose.
Thank you. I would like to know what the process, what I need to do to make to amend my amendment. Can it be a friendly amendment?
I believe you can make a suggestion, if your second agrees, then we can discuss it.
Okay.
But I'm gonna call a friend and call my city clerk parliamentarian friend. Tisha, can the motion maker make the friendly amendment?
Yes, she can make an amendment that needs a second and then needs to be agreed upon by the council by a roll call vote or by unanimous consent.
So even changing the amendment she has on the table requires a separate vote.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Your amendment?
Thanks. So I like Jim Haney's, one of his three, that's the most consistent with what my intent would be, and that is to eliminate both the at a minimum language and not include maximum. So it would just say shall contain the following information.
Thank you. So it's a different kind of edit, and the clerk is going to show that for us up there. Is there a second? Council President Hunt.
This is Council President Hunt. I second. And I think and I'm also the second on the other motion.
Yeah, we'll get to that one after this.
Okay. I thought maybe I needed to be the second, but maybe not.
Oh, no, but I'm glad that you stepped up and did it. Thank you. So we have a slight word change again. I'll ask the motion maker a second. Would you like to make a comment, and then we'll see if any of the other council members have a question or a comment on the word change. Councilmember Goodman.
Unless somebody has a clarifying question for me, I think I've commented enough.
Thank you. I am seeing a comment from Council President Hunt.
This is Council President Hunt. I plan on supporting this because I think it gives some certainty to the business owners that the list isn't going to change. And I like the change that's been made to let people know the intent.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. I like this version the best out of the versions that I've heard. I think it addresses the concern, I believe it addresses the concern that Councilmember Goodman brought up, while also allowing the administration to get the information it needs. So I'll be supporting this amendment to the bill on the floor.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other comments at this time. I guess my question for the city clerk is, we'll be voting on the language change that is shown on the screen, which is to remove the words at a minimum from the ordinance. Let me just check in my notes and make sure if I've missed anybody else wanting to comment. So the amendment is to remove the words at a minimum on page 3. All those in favor, say aye. Oh, sorry, roll call vote.
Mayor,
yes.
No. Well, actually, I was going to suggest that if we could ask the city council if there's any objection to amending the amendment as shown on the screen to strike at a minimum. Is there any objection to that change?
Thank you. This is a process that our city clerk is getting us to use. Is there any objection to the amendment to remove the words at a minimum that is shown on the screen? Any objection?
I object.
Can you, thank you, Barb, for indicating it also in the chat box. There is an objection. City clerk, how do we proceed with an objection?
And just to clarify here, we're not yet voting on the amendment. So here we're just agreeing to the change that was discussed to remove at a minimum. Now that there's an objection, then any discussion can occur and we can take a roll call vote on the change to the amendment.
Okay. So I think the clerk is really trying to help us here. This is not a vote on whether we like those words or not. It's a vote on whether or not the amendment can contain those words or not. Does that make it clearer?
No.
Okay. See how else I can phrase this. This is complicated, and for those that don't follow parliamentary practice like we do, I'm going to see if Council President Hunt can rephrase it in a more understandable way.
Well, I think the way I see it is that if you're opposed to the change altogether, then that's in the amendment. But currently, correct, we're working on basically getting to that amendment that, correct, the motion maker wanted to make. But we had some discussion, and so we wanted to make a change. But the current amendment to the amendment gets us to where we want to be for that discussion. And then it sounds like, based on your objection, Councilmember DeMichelle, then based on the intent of that, you might want to oppose that one.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helped.
What this first vote, thank you, Council President. What this first vote is doing is allowing the motion maker for the amendment to change some wording in the amendment. It is not a vote on whether or not those will be the final words. You will consider that when you take the second vote, which would be on the amendment itself. So this is a vote to change the wording on an amendment that you have not yet voted on. Is that a better way of saying it?
Can I try?
Councilmember DeMichelle, does it help or is it just making it more confusing?
I think I'm okay.
Okay. So if I can have the city clerk rephrase it, this is a vote to change the wording of the amendment. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, so change what we had initially was the word shall contain at a maximum the following information. So what we'd be voting on is to take that phrase out as well as remove at a minimum
from the proposed
screen.
From the proposed amendment language. Thank you.
Correct. So we'll take a roll call vote at this time on that change, and if that passes, then the council can continue any debate on the amendment itself and take a vote.
Thank you. Let's do the roll call vote.
All right. So the vote on the amendment to the amendment, Councilmember DeMichelle.
All right. I still vote nay.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
6 ayes and 1 nay. Councilmember DeMichelle opposed. The amendment to the amendment is adopted.
City Clerk, can you read us the language of the amendment?
So the amendment currently is in Section 3A of the Sidewalk and Private Property Ordinance to strike at a minimum, and in Section 3B to strike if all of the following criteria are met, and insert with the following criteria as conditions of approval, and to note the conditions on the application and the permit.
Thank you. That has helped a lot. All right, I'm not seeing any additional comments or discussion on the revised amendment that's in front of us. So if there is none, I will have the clerk do the roll call vote.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Nay.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Sorry, my audio just went away. Am I back? Sorry, my
Yes.
phone just glitched. I'm sorry. Did I miss my
Sorry.
roll call?
I'm going to have the city clerk verify what she's already heard in the roll call vote.
Okay, I heard Councilmember Hall. So next up is Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 1 nay. Councilmember DeMichelle opposed. The amendment is passed.
Thank you, City Clerk. I believe we now are. Oops. Hang on one second. Let me bring my chat box back up.
Way up to texting.
I'm not seeing anything in chat. Councilmember DeMichelle, did you want to make a comment?
And can I ask that Christina from the DIA board, could you please mute?
Oh, maybe that's what I was hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember DeMichelle, did you want to make a comment?
No comment, but we've lost the ability to enter wording into the chat. Or at least I have.
I noticed that too.
Yeah.
Look at the city clerk. There was some glitch.
Yeah.
You know what? I believe
was.
it's back now, Councilmember DeMichelle. I can see. I can see it. Yeah, can you see the chat right now? Are you able to
No.
use it? Well, that's
And
odd.
Madam Mayor, it may take, if you close it and reopen it, I think that may help.
Okay. I'll give Councilmember DiMichele the opportunity to do that because that is the way we are using, that is what we are using right now to raise hands. Councilmember DiMichele.
I'm good now. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So checking with the city clerk, the amendment has passed on a vote of 6-1. We're now moving back on to the main motion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Not seeing any additional comments at this time. I am going to reread it. The motion is to adopt ordinance number
2909.
2909, adopting an interim zoning regulation allowing the temporary use of parking lots, sidewalks, and public right-of-ways to support businesses during the Safe Start Washington phased reopening, suspending the operation of certain provisions of the Issaquah Municipal Code during the effective period of the interim zoning regulation, establishing a permit process for such temporary uses, setting the date for a public hearing, declaring an emergency, and establishing an effective date. Has been moved and seconded. Do I read both ordinances together, City Clerk?
Yes, they were offered in one motion together.
Thank you. And moving to adopt ordinance number
2910.
Adopting an interim zoning regulation allowing the temporary use of parking lots, sidewalks, and public right-of-ways to support businesses. I'll make sure I'm not just rereading the same thing. I'm going through my notes, which seems to have the same wording. I believe the second one is the motion to adopt ordinance number. Tisha?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's ordinance 2910, and were you able to locate the wording?
I am in the script. Thank you very much. Okay. Adopting an interim zoning regulation allowing certain commercial A-frame signs, suspending the operation of certain portions of Issaquah Municipal Code Section 18.11.230 during the effective period of the interim zoning regulations, setting the date for a public hearing, declaring an emergency, and establishing an effective date. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember DiMichele?
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall?
Aye.
Council President Hunt?
Aye.
Councilmember Martz?
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray?
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh?
Aye.
With a vote of 7 ayes, 0 nays, the ordinances are adopted.
Thank you. That passed unanimously. Thank you, staff, for the presentations. We're going to move on to the next item this evening, which is AB 7992, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, funding allocation. The request before council this evening is to authorize those allocations, and I'd like to invite City Administrator Wally Bobkowitz to present this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Tisha, if you could bring up the PowerPoint, please. Great, thank you. So this is the third portion of our discussion tonight regarding the COVID-19 recovery, and that's the CARES Act funding. Next slide. I think many of you are aware of this, but the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as CARE, was I think the second or third major policy document that the United States Congress passed at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. Was enacted on March 27, 2020. It provided much money to the 50 states, cities, and counties over 500,000 to grapple with the COVID-19 crisis, as well as money for private businesses and funds for individuals. It was the major congressional action thus far dealing with economic relief for the COVID-19 crisis. Unfortunately, there was no money for communities under 500,000 in that act, and as we sit here this evening, the Congress of the United States has still not passed any direct relief for communities under 500,000 in the United States. We are the only major business sector in the country that has not had an opportunity to have access to relief. Fortunately, though, two governments that we are part of have received funds, and they have made those funds available to localities. The state of Washington made a portion of its CARES Act funds available to the city of Issaquah, and that totals $1,127,700. And King County, through its allocation of CARES Act dollars, has provided $50,000 specifically for economic development. So the question, one of the many questions that are before the council tonight really is that third square, rectangle, and that is who benefits. Who can get the dollars, and who spend the dollars, and what is the process for us to receive the funds from King County and the state of Washington and then make them available. Local businesses, local human service agencies are eligible under certain conditions, and we're also able to reimburse certain expenses that the city has already incurred fighting the COVID-19 crisis.
City Administrator Bobkowitz, with that amazing introduction, I wonder if you would allow us to have a short break, just to allow, we are 3 hours into the meeting, just to allow folks to get in a glass of water or take a quick break. And if we could just take a 5-minute recess, that would be helpful.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we will be back at around 9:55. And thank you for doing that. about the recording. We still have one council member who's not at his, as I can see. But I'm thinking of getting the meeting going anyway. Tim, are you ready or do you need some lead time? You say that. Are we good to go? Thank you very much. I will go back to City Administrator Bobkowitz and apologize for interrupting you after your wonderful introduction, but I think everybody needs a little bit of a break. So you are on, Wally.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Deputy Clerk, take us to the next slide. So of the funds that have been allocated, the administration is here this evening to propose the following funding scenario. $550,000 of direct grants to local businesses, which we will detail in a moment. That includes $50,000 that is being allocated from King County with the express purpose of providing economic development assistance. $200,000 of assistance to human service agencies, which we will also detail in a moment. And then $427,700 reimbursement to the city for COVID-19 expenses already incurred. So as we have looked at these numbers and since the agenda packet has been published, we've gotten feedback from members of the council. We've gotten feedback from some of the human service agencies that we are proposed giving money to. We've also had interest amongst members of the council of making additional monies available for rental assistance for tenants. If the council certainly recalls, early in the COVID crisis, the council took a very early step in making $100,000 available to nonprofits here in Issaquah to provide tenant rental assistance. During those discussions, again, hearing from our human service agencies, thinking about if rental assistance were to be incorporated into this, one issue kept coming back to us, and that is our ability to have that money then reimbursed to us, the lion's share of it through Washington State and Washington State Department of Commerce, as well as King County. And so I'd like to phone a friend and ask Beth Goldberg, our finance director, to come on. Beth has been talking with the State Department of Commerce for a few weeks now, trying to get a good sense of what is reimbursable and what is not reimbursable. And for those things that are reimbursable, what are, I won't say strings, but what are conditions that we would have to make to any agency or individual business that we receive money from? What conditions would we have to include in order to meet the requirements set forward first by the federal government and then implemented by the state of Washington? So Beth, can you give a brief overview of what you've learned over the last few weeks about the ease or lack thereof of what that process might look like?
Yeah, I would say lack thereof.
Some
Beth, we're having a little trouble
audio,
hearing.
yeah, some audio quality issues there.
Is it better now? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is it better now?
A little
Yes.
bit.
Okay, this earpiece doesn't actually fit on my ear, so. But I was told I had to use it because there's an echo. So hopefully this is better. So lack of clarity is the operative word, and pretty much everything we have looked to want to use this money for, we have had multiple contacts with the State Department of Commerce to make sure that our intent of how to use the money will work. The rules are not clear at all. And one of the things that we have found in working through this is any sort of pass-through money that we provide to community members, whether that be through nonprofits, businesses, what have you, they are subject to the same very difficult, very murky federal rules that we are subject to. And we as a government have been struggling with the workload from this. And what we're hearing from many of our service providers is that they too are not sure that they have the capability to meet all of the rules and requirements. And this is important because all of this is subject to audit. So if we don't use the money in proper ways and follow all of the rules, we are subject to audit findings, and this amount of money is sizable enough that it is likely to be audited by the state auditor. So we very much want to support the business assistance, housing stability, and food security priorities that our communities have. We're struggling with ways that we can do that in a way that won't subject our partners to the same requirements that we have. And we've heard, and Monica spoke about this earlier in her presentation, we've heard from some of the nonprofits that they're just not in a position to meet all of those or to follow all of those rules and regulations. So having some flexibility to find partners that can work with us to still deliver on the intent of the money, I think is the objective that we are looking for as we figure out how to distribute this money. We certainly don't want to be in a position where we're returning the money because we know that the need is there in the community. So it's finding that that sweet spot that's not going to get any of us into trouble with the federal regulation.
So, and let me try to put a finer point on that as we look at these three buckets of money. The $427,700 that we have put forward as reimbursements, we feel fairly comfortable through the vetting we have already done that those are solid numbers, that we have the documentation necessary, and that those dollars, should we submit them for reimbursement to the State Department of Commerce, we will get that money back. The direct grants to local businesses, we are probably in the middle of the pack of communities that are making these allocations to businesses. In King County, probably hard to know where we are nationwide, but there are several communities a few steps ahead of us in King County, and we have liberally borrowed some of the good work that they have already done as far as the conditions and the details of a grant application and grant agreement. So I think we are feeling generally comfortable about what will be required of local businesses. Other communities have been working with local businesses in their communities, and we think that that's something we can sort out. It's that middle $200,000, the human services agencies, which we're unsure of as far as having those agencies be able to accept the money and do the appropriate reporting, and they may choose not to take that. Some of the larger agencies we've talked to have already let us know that they are more comfortable and are in a position to take that money. Again, there's been some interest on the council of having another tranche of funds available for tenant rental assistance. We've discovered that the funds that we've already allocated are not eligible for reimbursement because some of the conditions that were ultimately created by the CARES Act were not a part of our original allocation, so we're not able to reimburse. So if we move forward with additional dollars for tenant rental assistance, one of our concerns is that each of those individuals who receive those dollars, in addition to the nonprofits, may have reporting requirements that may be too onerous. So if the council wishes to go in that direction, what we may be able to do is look to freeing up additional city dollars, which would only have any conditions that the city council would place on them, that might make better sense for any money that's provided to human service agencies. So we will talk in more detail when we get to that section. But we wanted to provide kind of this preamble to start, hoping to focus the conversation that the council has at the conclusion of the presentation so we can really get to what you want to do. I think if the council can provide us a general direction of what you'd like to do and the type of money, the amounts of money you would like to put in these various buckets, we feel pretty confident we can come up with a solution that will make sense. So with that preamble, next.
Administrator Bobkowitz, I believe you have a question from Council President Hunt.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. So when you were talking about the reporting requirements and that some agencies might not be able to meet those requirements or feel comfortable trying to meet those requirements, So you said that applied to the human service agencies. I guess my question is, and not seeing much information about that in our materials, why, so the reporting requirements for the funds, businesses though would be confident that they could meet whatever reporting requirements. The reporting requirements are so different that for businesses that isn't a concern.
Again, what we've learned from other communities, and there's lots of experience in King County with cities making grants to businesses. There's less experience with human services agencies. Monica is prepared to talk to this in her part of the presentation. We have heard from the human service agencies that we have named in this proposal over the last several days, who are very thankful that we thought of and thankful it can absolutely use the money. They have shared with us their own concerns based on what they have heard from other human service agencies around the area about the ability to do the necessary reporting. The truth is out there. We don't know exactly what the truth is, and I don't know anyone will. And I think, as Director Goldberg said, we'll know the truth when the audits come. And so we're just trying to present the information to the council this evening as best we understand it. The human service agencies we're talking to are understanding the information as best they understand it. We're all just trying to help people, and but also be cognizant of, is the money worth what could be multiple years of audits in the future? And that's what we're trying to do. And again, Monica can speak to more specifics at her point.
So, City Administrator, the friend that you phoned at 10 o'clock at night, who may or may not be your friend anymore, said that she would like to add a comment, and we'll follow up with another comment from Council President Hunt.
Right.
Director Goldberg?
Oh, Beth, you're still my friend, right, Beth?
I think I'm your friend. I don't know.
It's way
Maybe.
too early in the year. It's way too early in the year.
Voted off the island. Yeah. I guess to speak to Council President Hunt's comment is there is still a risk on the business side. I think what we're hearing is that the chamber, who's offered to partner with us, feels that they are positioned to handle these requirements. Larger nonprofits are also, that are used to receiving federal dollars, are better positioned to meet these requirements. It's smaller nonprofits, entities that don't get these kinds of grants, federal grant dollars with regularity, are just not positioned to do that. But there is a word of caution with anyone that we partner with on this, and frankly, even ourselves, that we need to be very careful that they and we are meeting our obligations, or we may be subject to audit findings. So as we're partnering with people, we also have an obligation to ensure that they are following the rules, or we too will be dinged if for any sort of misstep.
Thank you for that, Director Goldberg. Council President Hunt has gotten the information she requested. So, City Administrator Bobkowitz, if you'd like to proceed with the presentation.
And next slide, please. So let me introduce then Jen Davis Hayes to talk a little bit about what we're thinking. But before I give up the mic, let me just again reiterate the City Council. Make decisions this evening that you think are in the best interest of the community. We'll do our level best to sort it out and make sure that the money gets into the hands of the people they need. We want to provide this caveat up front because that's our responsibility to do that. But it should not be interpreted in any way as being any kind of roadblock. Other communities all over America are sorting this out, and we can't do. So with that, Jen, do you want to walk through our proposal for the local business grant?
Great, thank you, City Administrator Bobkowitz. We presented this concept of a business grant program at the study session on June 9th and asked if there was interest from council, and we heard that there was. And so we're back here tonight to present the program. And as mentioned, we have researched what other cities have done. Kathy McCory from the Issaquah Chamber looked at some, and I've spoken to some staff. So Snoqualmie, North Bend, Shoreline, Everett, Seattle, Sequim, Lacey are just a few of those cities. And also talked to Jim Haney about the concept. So what we discovered is that most cities are using very similar criteria that was utilized by the state of Washington's COVID-19 Small Business Emergency Grant Program. And again, the uncertainty of the CARES Act money, and also with the state's typical prohibition against lending of using public funds for businesses, the Attorney General has provided an interpretation that opens up that ability to do that. And so, again, most city attorneys and city staff and city finance people have been talking to each other and believe that if we follow the same criteria and the same way of doing that the state did, that we should have less risk. So that is what we're doing. We, again, have looked at what others are doing and are proposing two small business pool funds, one for small businesses. And so when I say small businesses, I mean fewer than 25 FTE employees. And we're looking at providing grants up to $10,000 for each business. And so out of a maximum of $50,000 in that pool. And the second pool would look at a business recovery or reinvention opportunity for businesses. And we heard some of that desire from the council conversation last time and how to support that innovation that we see in our business community. And so we're, again, looking up to $10,000 to help support efforts around physical improvements they've had to make, or if they change their line of business, the ability to help support that and ongoing to help their financial situation. So for the proposal for the larger pool, we will plan to open up applications if approved tonight, starting approximately July 1st, and have awards announced the beginning of August. And the way we plan on doing that is to use, so basically the application criteria that we would ask about beyond the basic business information would be about their impacts to the reduction of revenues from year to year, from 2019 to 2020, the impacts on their employee counts, how they plan to spend the money, what their recovery plan is, and then making sure that they have confirmed that they're up to date on their license, and so basically in good business standing. And our vision partners have offered to help assist with the evaluation of this pool. Right now, our idea is to move forward with, or recommendation is to move forward with placing all eligible businesses in a pool and randomly selecting applications to up to $500,000. That we would then work with a business to do a grant agreement, again, something that every business needs to do in order to make sure we have all the rules that with the CARE Act covers, and reporting for that. So again, looking at where their cities are doing that are a few steps ahead of us, and learning from cities that have done some creative things, such as asking businesses that have received the funding to send a picture and a small description about their business to help promote their business. And so we're looking to be creative about those things as well. And then for the second pool, again, we wanted to allocate some resources for the innovation that our business community definitely is capable of. And so we are recommending to work with our Economic Vitality Commission to create the eligibility and review committee criteria, and again, offering up to $10,000 each for a maximum of $50,000. And so that is the general outline, and I see some questions popping up.
Thank you. Let's start with Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. So on that first one, we're going to potentially draw, and we could draw 50 $10,000 plans in a row, or we could draw one $500,000 plan, and you could be at either end of that spectrum.
Could you, so the last part, you're saying one grant for 500,000? Is that what you said?
Well, I mean, you know, we could have a grant of 500,000 over here, or we could have 50 grants of $10,000 over there, and those are equally likely outcomes based just sort of randomly.
No. So we, in the grant application, when we ask for what they intend to spend the money on, we would limit that to $10,000. Some businesses may ask for 8,000 or 5,000 because they have to provide proof or, kind of the outline of what they plan to spend it on. So if we received an application asking for $500,000, that would make it ineligible because it did not meet the criteria.
I'm sorry, I misheard your presentation. I thought you were saying up to 500,000, meaning applications of up to 500. I now understand. Thank you.
Sorry. So we would select more than 50 if some businesses ask for less. So that's why I said that. Sorry.
That's great. I'm not seeing any other questions. Jen, if you want to continue. I've changed my mind. There is a question from Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you for changing your mind, Mayor Pauly. Real quick, can you just, the Economic Vitality Commission, is there overlap with members who serve in the chamber with that commission?
Well, Kathy McCory, who is the CEO of the chamber, serves on the Economic Vitality Commission. And I have to be honest, I'm not sure. There are probably chamber members. I'm not sure about chamber board members that are also on the Economic Vitality Commission. It's a broader collection of business representatives.
Right.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Jen, if you want to continue.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we are looking to be able to do this very quickly. And so we're working on right now having a website up by the end of this week that actually provides businesses some more information about how they can prepare for the application, which we anticipate to launch on July 1st. And we would have that open for 2 weeks. And then in between those 2 weeks, be able to check eligibility and make sure that those who applied are meeting the criteria that we selected, and work again with our finance committee to award those grants and get the money into the hands of the businesses, which we think is really important to do that quickly. I am done with my presentation.
Thank you. I do not see any additional questions for you. City Administrator Bobkowitz. Oh, I do. Councilmember Walsh would like to ask a question on the business program. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. Is there any plans to have a requirement that someone has a brick and mortar store or location that is open to the public? I get concerned about online businesses or businesses that might have a membership or private or, something that wouldn't be public accessible.
That's a great question. Right now, our criteria is that be physically located in the city of Issaquah, so that would be eligible for home-based businesses. If there's some desire to limit or to create some unique or additional language around that, we'd be open to that.
Okay. I heard that as an interest from the business community when I was on a call previously. And then also that we ask if the business is currently open or has plans to reopen, so that we are hoping to grant the money to businesses that have plans to reopen, not just those that are in the midst of closing down.
Yes, that is one of the questions that, again, that most cities ask, and so that would be on our application as well. And so, again, most of the businesses plan to stay open, so we would see if there's any businesses that would answer that differently. So,
thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Some thoughts in there. I'm not seeing any other questions right now, Jen. City Administrator Bobkowitz.
Next slide, please, Tisha. So we have the human services category. We've done a little bit of preamble on this. Monica Negrilla, Jeff Watling are on the line. Monica, do you want to walk through the basics of this and then perhaps fill in a little information on what you've heard from these organizations since the agenda packet went out at the end of last week?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So yes, Monica Negrilla here. I think this is a no-brainer. For human services needs, they are greater than all the resources that we have, so there's no doubt about that. The proposed funding allocation aligns with the city priorities of maintaining food on the table and roof overhead. So in the first category, we have organizations that provide food assistance and other basic needs. And then aligning with the other city priority of maintaining roof overhead, we proposed legal assistance funds to one of the legal assistance program that we work with here on the east side. So that being said, now just a little bit about the challenges that were mentioned earlier. So some of the organizations, as it was mentioned, are smaller organizations, while others are larger, and therefore they might offer regional services in addition to services to the local residents here in Issaquah. So again, the concern is not necessarily that they cannot meet the certain requirements. On one end, I think it takes a little bit more time to figure out all the details just because they have in-kind donations and trying to figure out and identify all the expenses that they had to date that would qualify for COVID response and therefore federal money. It's going to take a little while, and therefore some of them might have concern that maybe they cannot spend all of the money by October 31st, which is the deadline. And so therefore they suggested that they would be open if we need to take $5,000, $10,000 away from their initial allocation in order to meet those requirements and just make sure that perhaps other organizations have a chance to benefit from it also. The other challenge, and especially with larger organizations that provide services regionally, is that there are some other cities, like for example, I've been in contact with the cities of Redmond and Kirkland, and they are also considering allocating CARES Act funds. And therefore, if we are not careful and we don't coordinate among each other, then one organization might end up with funding from all cities, while others might not receive any funds from us. And that also can put another burden onto being able to now spend 3 pots of money for 3 federal dollars from 3 different cities. So those are the considerations and the reasons why I think it's just a little bit more challenging and it's going to take a little bit more time. And so on our end, I would love to have a little bit of flexibility when contracting with the organizations and to be able to coordinate with the organizations and with the other cities as well. And I can pause here for questions and I can go into even more detail, but I'm not sure.
That is great. Thank you. We do have some questions. I believe first up is Councilmember Hall, followed by Deputy Council President Ray. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly and Monica. This is Zach Hall. I have a few questions under the housing tenant part of this. I guess they're mainly focused around this legal assistance that you have here. So my first question is, are we seeing that there is a need in Issaquah for legal representation for tenants or homeowners? And then why are we thinking that we should, or why is the proposal to give money for legal assistance instead of straight up rental assistance? And then I apologize, this is more just of a logistics question. I didn't ask this earlier today and I apologize, but doesn't the Eastside Legal Assistance Program, don't they provide free legal assistance? So what would the money that we give them go to? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Great questions. So for your first question, as far as why legal assistance program and not rental assistance, and perhaps while I'm answering this question, if Beth is also available, still available, would love to have more details from her. My understanding is that one of the criterias for the COVID, so one of the federal criteria for the money to be eligible for reimbursement is that it should be spent directly by the organization, and therefore there would be additional requirements if the organization gives the money directly to residents. I think there should be additional paperwork or contract with each of the residents that the organization serves. So should I pause here, Beth, for you to add more to this?
Yeah, let's get Director Goldberg to add some context, perhaps. Thank you, Director Goldberg.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not to get too much into the nitpicky details, but basically any money we give to another organization to then distribute to others, each party needs to enter a sub-recipient contract relationship in order to demonstrate to the feds that the money is being spent in accordance with the rules, with the federal rules around the money. So it not only would be potentially Eastside legal assistance, but any money that they gave out or whomever was giving out the money to recipients would need to assure the subrecipient and then us that they are using the money in a way that meets the federal regulations. And if any money is left over and is not spent, then we would have to collect it from each of those parties as well.
Thank you, Beth. Some of the council members are having a hard time hearing. I'm going to go back over to City Administrator Bobkowitz. If you could repeat what Director Goldberg was trying to relay, and then after that, I know that Director Watling wants to add some information as well.
I think simply, Madam Mayor, members of the council, what Director Goldberg was saying is that on the tenant assistance side, there would be additional documentation, we believe, and I think that would just make the program a little bit more difficult for us to administer if we use CARES Act dollars for it.
Thank you. And Director Watling, you wanted to add some commentary, and then we have some additional questions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And City Administrator Bobkowitz covered it. I just wanted to reiterate the complications with utilizing these federal funds from one agency to pass them on to residents, and the sub-recipient requirements that can become quite cumbersome with federal dollars. Also, just wanted to touch on legal assistance and your question, Councilmember Hall, in terms of what this funding would go for. My understanding is, yes, Eastside Legal Assistance Program does offer free legal assistance, but they certainly have increased costs to cover their the increased need for that legal assistance. So this would be funds that would cover their increased expenses. That's it.
So I think what you're saying is their staff doesn't work pro bono, so it's free to the recipient, but the Eastside Legal Assistance Program has to pay them to do it. If that's what I heard correctly. I'm going to go back to Deputy Council President Ray. I think you were the next one up with question.
I think I am. Hi, this is Chris Ray. And Monica, did I hear you say that the money has to be spent by the end of August?
I'm sorry, that was October 31st.
October, okay. So it's the end of the federal fiscal year? That makes sense. Okay, I just misheard. Now, and this is me trying to understand what I just heard. Things like the Food and Clothing Bank and Catholic Community Services and Baby Corner, they're all good grantees because they're actually using the money then to provide services. So where we run into a snag is if we're using an agency as a pass-through, and then if we're doing a pass-through, then the recipient of the cash has reporting requirements. Is that kind of what I think I heard?
Yes.
Lots of head nodding in case people can't see.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Monica.
Great, thank you. That's great.
I'm going to move to Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you. Councilmember DiMichele here. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I support the idea of giving our staff flexibility because we are in unknown territory here. And I appreciate Monica's comments about coordinating with our sister cities on the east side so that we're not leaving some people out in the cold and other people perhaps get too much money, although I don't know how that would actually happen. So the other comment, just a few words about Eastside Legal Assistance Program. They do have, I believe the number is 8 lawyers on staff full time. And then they have over 200 lawyers who volunteer or do part-time work for them, and they do try to reimburse them so that it's, so that it makes it feasible for those lawyers to actually donate that time. And there are many times when they provide legal assistance for people who don't speak English. And there are certainly times when a little legal advice, I'm sure Mr. Haney will appreciate this, can save a lot of issues down the road. If they can help someone stay in their home or find out what their rights are under the law, that will help alleviate or prevent a full-blown disaster. And so I fully support providing funds to Eastside Legal Assistance Program. I do have one question for Monica. I believe that ELAP has an office in Issaquah, or they provide services here at the Senior Center. Is that correct, Monica? Uh-oh, we've lost Monica.
Muted. We've lost Monica. There we go. She's back.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. My understanding is that they provide services in Bellevue. However, I know that in the last few months, as I referred many residents to them, they were very responsive over the phone. They also, from time to time, provide clinics at different libraries. So they have been at the Issaquah Library and also at the Issaquah Senior Center in the past, but it's not a regular kind of like ongoing process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I responded fully to Councilmember Hall's initial question regarding the services, but I think that's what I exactly just said. We did have many residents requesting need, even just for simple questions and clarifying questions or mediation services. So definitely the need was there.
And Councilmember Hall, you did sign up for an additional follow-up question, I believe, or did she catch it?
Thanks, Mayor Pauly. This is Zach Hall. She caught it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councilmember Goodman for a comment.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. I agree with Councilmember DiMichele about the staff attorneys and the attorneys who work on a pro bono basis. I think it will be important for that for ELAP to have additional resources, because when the eviction moratorium is lifted, there are going to be a lot of folks who need that service. And as we also heard tonight, just providing rental assistance is not a long-term sustainable program for us or probably any city or county. So that's going to be important. ELAP also provides other kinds of advice, and it may have been that they were at the Senior Center for this, so they provide estate planning services, wills and powers of attorney. So my comment would be, and I'm sure that on the ball, Monica already has this covered, but we would want to make sure that our money is earmarked for their housing stability project, not for their estate planning services. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more comments or questions in the comment box right now. City Administrator Bobkowitz or Monica, are we ready to continue?
I don't have other information unless I'm open for questions.
Great.
And Deputy Clerk, I believe that was the last slide. Is that correct? No, we've got city reimbursement. Goodness, I knew
there we go.
And then lastly, one item that we can claim money for are expenses that we have already incurred in the COVID-19 crisis. So there are two pots of money, standby pay. A number of our employees were on alternating shifts early in the process, so they are now all off of those shifts and are back on regular shifts, but there was a cost associated with that of about $366,000. And we've also identified an additional $33,721 of direct response expenses that the Director Goldberg has reviewed, along with guidance from the State Department of Commerce, which we believe would be reversible. And then the $27,876.67 is really a balancing number that gets us through to the entire $1.1 million allocation, and that would be for additional response expenses through October 31. Next slide, Deputy Clerk.
We do have a question on that slide from Deputy Council President Ray.
Go back.
Is it on that particular slide?
It is on that particular slide.
Okay.
This is Chris Ray. I'm just curious, is this all general fund city reimbursement, or does it span across other enterprise funds?
It is the majority general fund. There's some street operating fund money here. There is some utility money here. So that money could either become a general fund revenue, or it could go back to the utility funds. And I think we would sort that out once the reimbursement is received.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. While I'm looking at the chat box and waiting for additional questions, I would like to give an opportunity to the Council President to summarize any of the public comment that might have come in over the last few days on this particular topic. Council President?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did receive a number of correspondence around this topic. We received about 11 emails in total that were supportive of using the CARES Act funding for small grants for businesses. In a number of those businesses, in a number of those letters, the resident explains the circumstances around a specific business, the challenges around a specific business, or the challenges around a specific type of business. For example, the challenges of the hospitality business, the challenges around businesses that are closed until phase 3 because of the type of business that it is, et cetera. And so generally supportive of funding for the small business grants, and then explaining the rationale for why that money is needed. We also received two letters in which the residents thought that $100,000 should be used for more human services funding. One said 100 to 200,000 more, and one said 100,000 more for human services funding. And then also one resident wrote that there should be criteria for businesses, so that for businesses to get the small grants, to ensure that those money is going to the businesses that need it most.
Thank you, Council President. I did have a question myself for the City Administrator and/or Monica, and that is, I have a proposed motion language that I have open in front of me, but the discussion about providing flexibility to the city to be able to work more on the human services side of it, is that granted in the motion and the action that's being taken, or is that a change to what has been requested this evening?
So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, the $200,000 in the motion, I think is general enough that if the council is comfortable, then that money could be allocated. Our intention would be to allocate it in the pattern in which we've identified in the agenda bill. If the council wishes to increase that amount or change that amount, the motion would need to reflect that.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that the concern that Monica had expressed about some agencies potentially being listed now who may not necessarily be the agencies receiving, but able to receive, but you believe there is the flexibility.
That's correct. I think the piece of flexibility that's not there, which I think, again, several council members have indicated interest in, the tenant assistance, we would need additional direction.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing a question from Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I had a question about the small business grant criteria. Right now we have criteria, but then the people who receive funding will be randomly selected from all the businesses that meet those criteria. And so I wondered if you considered, or if there are other cities that have these small business grant programs that have a need-based system or a phase or a type of, which phase affects which kind of business, more type system to address the highest need rather than random selection.
City Administrator Bobkowitz or Jen, who would like to take the question?
Let Jen start.
Jen, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so again, different cities are evaluating in different ways. So I know that when we evaluated the grant applications from the Washington State Emergency Grant Program, because that was referred down to the cities to look at, we had a weighted grant review criteria process. The challenge is all these businesses are in need, and it's challenging beyond the businesses that may never had to close or partially close to really rank one above the other in a true way. The information we does ask again about the revenue changes, et cetera, so we could look at that, but every business is in need, and I think of those 11 comments you received in the public comment we heard earlier, there is across the board a need for business grants, and so it would be challenging if we have several hundred applications to really truly pick which are the 45, 50 businesses that are in most need.
Council President Hunt, did you have additional follow-up to that?
No, that answers my question.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman, question.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. So Jen, it's possible that you addressed this and my mind was elsewhere. So there was an email with answers to questions today. I believe the questions came from Councilmember Hall, and embedded in the answers was something about the Washington State Small Business Grants. And I had asked a clarifying question about whether those grants were COVID related, and you said yes. And I think also important in your answer was that there were, was it 48 or 58 applications from Issaquah? And I was just, could you address that and just state in a few sentences to clarify that? Because I think it's important, because I think it's, if my understanding is correct of what your clarifying answer was to me, that signifies or really is an indication of a real significant need in the business community in Issaquah. Thank you.
Jen?
Yes, so the Washington State Small Business Emergency Grant Program was related to impacts for COVID-19. It was available to businesses throughout the state, and it was opened maybe the end of March, beginning of April, or in April. And there was overwhelming response in certain counties, especially King. King County decided, and this isn't King County government, but the organization that, the Economic Development Organization, decided to close the application period after a day and a half. So we received many emails and calls asking, hey, wait, I was gonna go apply for this. So knowing that it was open for a day and a half, we received 58 applications from Issaquah businesses. And we actually, the state just announced awards, and there were 2 businesses in the city of Issaquah that did receive those grants. So again, 58 businesses applied, 2 received them. We did a weighting eligibility kind of analysis and worked with our vision partners to select, and again, challenging to pick. We were able to select 12 to recommend, and again, 2 were selected based from the Department of Commerce and Governor's Office for funding, which was just announced. So we know there's still a need, and again, I would estimate we're going to have several hundred applications come in that are going to be eligible for this resource. And again, we're looking at being able to pay your rent, your payroll, your normal business expenses. We're not looking at, if you're trying to do a new venture in this pool, but just the things that you haven't been able to pay because of the reduction in revenue.
Thank you, Jen. Councilmember Goodman, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks. I am not seeing any other questions at this time. I'll give it a few seconds. If anybody is wanting to make a motion, I believe our clerk has made it quite easy by posting the words in our chat. I'm going to go to Council President Hunt for a motion.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I move to, one, authorize the allocation of $1,127,700 designated to the city by the state of Washington from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act as follows: $500,000 for direct business grants, $427,700 for reimbursement of portion of city expenses incurred to address the COVID-19 crisis, and $200,000 for assistance to human service agencies serving Issaquah residents, and 2, authorize the allocation of $50,000 designated to the city by King County from the CARES Act for direct business grants, and 3, direct the finance director to include the revenue and related expenditures in a subsequent 2020 budget amendment.
Thank you. And I was just going to go to you, Deputy Council President Ray.
Thank you. This is Chris Ray. I second the motion.
Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Oops, lost my script. We'll start with Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I'll start off the discussion. I think that the reinvention and recovery money, the $50,000 that's for that, I think that that could be a really good program because I've seen so much creativity from our business community and reinvention already, and working together with other businesses in creative ways. So to strengthen that and to allow businesses to do more of that, I think will be really key to some businesses making it through the challenges they're currently facing. So I'm very supportive of that. And I also am generally supportive of giving the small grants for businesses as well. I think that there is a demonstrated need. A number of businesses are facing very unique challenges right now, and I agree with the comments that were made about businesses being so important to our identity as a city and to our community, and I agree with all those comments. My biggest concern is about the lack of funding for renters. I think we have a crisis that's looming, especially with the eviction moratorium that's going to be raised, and we don't seem to be addressing that here. And so I think that's my biggest concern about the current proposal and the current allocation. I also think that it sounds like the amount of money for human services is based on the needs of the agencies that are there, and that giving more potentially might not make sense at this time to those agencies. That was my reading of the comments that were made earlier by our staff. But at the same time, I know that there's a huge need in the community, so I think we need to do something about that, and maybe we do that separately. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. I'm not seeing anyone else signed up to comment, but I will give it a few seconds. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Thank you. Not to be flip, but there are times when I wish that the city of Issaquah could print money, and this is one of them, because you look at the list and you go, all of these needs are so important. And I took to heart the comments received from the business community, representatives from the business community and business owners. You wish that you could give them the whole amount, but I do think we need to balance between getting businesses up and running and giving support to people who, through no fault of their own, have found themselves without employment. All of a sudden, this was such a sudden thing. This was something that nobody could have planned for, and so we need to provide a balanced approach here. And so I do support this motion. along with Council President Hunt, I'm very concerned about this looming crisis. And Monica Negrilla mentioned that there are long-term solutions that need to be reviewed, but we've been reviewing long-term solutions for at least a decade, and we're no closer to a solution for the high cost of housing and for homelessness than we were a decade ago. And so for the short term, I do think we need to explore whether we can find funding within the city to provide rent assistance. And I'd like to have proposals brought forward sooner rather than later. Perhaps at the same time that we look at the funding for Village Theater, we could also be taking a look at possible proposals for that. So I really strongly support our coming back and looking at rent assistance in the future. So overall, I will be supporting this motion, and just hope that we can continue to work with our business community. I want to commend staff for what I think has been a superb job of reaching out and working with people in our business community. And I hope that we can continue to support each other as we go through this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. I will continue Councilmember DeMichelle's comments of commending staff for the agility and the ability to respond to both our community values with this money, and then also the amazing needs that we're seeing in the community, and listening to the business community and then also our human services needs and being able to respond to that. I support the way that we have distributed this money. I think it gives chunks to each of the areas that are important. I'm interested to see how we can look at rental assistance, but I very much appreciate that the staff and Beth Goldberg, Director Goldberg, was very interested in being protective of the individuals and the regulatory requirements that might happen if we used particularly the CARES Act to move things on. So I think I would say back to our administration and staff, let's look at some other ways that we can approach this. And I'm comfortable with the split as we have presented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. I'm going to support this. I agree with the comments about balancing. I also, in terms of rental assistance, interested. I do think it's prudent to wait a little bit and see what happens with the eviction moratorium. That's a little bit of an unknown. Maybe it gets extended. I don't know. But that's another piece of the puzzle that we should look at. The different comment that I have is just a suggestion, and that is that it's easy for us sitting here and people who are connected to the chamber to know that to have been alerted already that there are going to be, or probably now tonight, probably going to be business grants available, but that doesn't mean that every business in the community knows about them. You know, my husband has a business in another city south of Issaquah, and I asked, he's struggled as well. So I've asked him, did you check X city to see if they're providing any business grants? Because we were talking about this agenda bill tonight. And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, well, never occurred to me to check with the city. So I think it's a really good idea for the city to make sure that we are advertising this well and the opportunity, just as we took care to make sure that we suggested to the administration that they make sure that we market the ability of residential tenants to apply for rental assistance. It's just as important for businesses, and not all businesses. And we need to make sure that we market it too for folks who, for which English is not their first language, because a lot of businesses are owned by people who that's not their first language. But I will be supporting this bill, and I want to thank the administration for all the work that they've done to make this a balanced approach. I know it's tough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I am not seeing any additional comments at this time. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I am supportive of this, as I said, but I do feel it's incomplete. And so I'm wondering if there's, and it sounds like from other council members' comments, you know, I think there is other council members also commented on the need for something for renters, and that this is, you know, there's the 30,000, I think, for the legal assistance, but then other than that, not directly addressing that need. And so I wondered if it would be appropriate to make a motion to direct, or if that, but I recognize that this is funding specifically for Federal CARES Act. So can you, if we talk more to it, would that maybe help, or should we direct the administration more formally?
I think, you know, we can have Monica come back on and talk about it. I don't think we have enough information at this point in time to know what else to offer up. And so I think that we have heard that the council is very interested in this, that we have heard council members express that they're interested in it, but I don't know that we have a proposal to bring back. And so I'll let City Administrator Bobkowitz speak. I think we need more time to collect what the options are. It may be that there are other funding sources out there that could be used for rental assistance that aren't city funds. It could be that there's a proposal to fund landlords so that they are able to keep their buildings operating. You can come at this from a bunch of different ways, and I'm just not sure that we have all that information or analysis done. City Administrator Bobkowitz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I would agree with the mayor. We don't have this evening a plan to put forward. There's lots of moving parts here. I think certainly first among them is the moratorium on evictions. And that is set, I believe it's August 4th. So I think if, Mayor, you would give your staff a few weeks to look at this, the council's calendar certainly is full through the month of June. But as we come back in July, perhaps at one of the study sessions in July, we could talk further about this, or perhaps have another special meeting to consider these options.
That sounds great. Council President Hunt?
Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, the moratorium being lifted, I guess we don't know if that will definitely be lifted, but I would like to have something in place a bit before that, so people that need that rental assistance before the eviction moratorium is lifted get it. So as soon as possible. My intent is not to rush into something that doesn't make sense, but at the same time, I just know there's this huge need right now.
Thank you for that. I will check one more time for additional questions or comments, and otherwise I will move to the motion. So the motion in front of the council this evening is to authorize the allocation of $1,127,700 designated to the city by the state of Washington from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES, as follows. $500,000 for direct business grants, $427,700 for reimbursement of portion of city expenses incurred to address the COVID-19 crisis, and $200,000 for assistance to human services agencies serving Issaquah residents, and to authorize the allocation of $50,000 designated to the city by King County from the CARES Act for direct business grants, and direct the finance director to include the revenue and related expenditures in the subsequent 2020 budget amendment. I will look to the city clerk to do a roll call vote.
Councilmember DiMichele?
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall?
Aye.
Council President Hunt?
Aye.
Councilmember Martz?
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray?
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh?
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. So the last item on our agenda this evening for the special meeting is the adjournment. And there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 11 p.m. Thank you for all your hard work tonight.